Wanting it hard enough. According to the master formula, you must not only know exactly what you want, but must also want it hard enough, and be willing to pay the price of its attainment. Having considered the first of the above stated 3 requisites for obtaining that which you want, we ask you now to consider the second requisite, i.e., that of wanting it hard enough. You may think that you want it hard enough when you have a rather keen desire or longing for anything, but when you compare your feeling with that of persons manifesting really strong, insistent desire, you will find that you are but merely manifesting a wish for that for which you have an inclination or an attachment. Compared to the insistent want or want to of thoroughly aroused desire, your wish is but as a shadow. The chances are that you have been a mere amateur, a dilettante, in the art and science of wanting and wanting to. Very few persons really know how to want or want to in such manner as to arouse fully the elemental forces of desire power. An old Oriental fable illustrates the nature of desire aroused to its fullest extent. The fable relates that a teacher took his pupil out on a deep lake, in a boat, and then suddenly pushed him overboard. The youth sank beneath the surface of the water, but rose in a few seconds, gasping for breath. Without giving him time to fill his lungs with air, the teacher forcibly pushed him under once more. The youth rose to the surface the second time, and was again pushed under. He rose for the third time, almost entirely exhausted. This time the teacher pulled him up over the side of the boat, and employed the usual methods to restore him to normal breathing. When the youth had fully recovered from his severe ordeal, the teacher said to him, "Tell me what was the one thing that you desired above all other things before I pulled you in, the one desire to which all other desires seem like tiny candles compared with the sun?" The youth replied, "Oh, sir, above all else I desired air to breathe. For me at that time there existed no other desires." Then said the teacher, "Let this, then, be the measure of your desire for those things to the attainment of which your life is devoted. You will not fully realize the measure of desire pointed out in this fable, unless you employ your imagination in the direction of feeling yourself in the drowning condition of the youth. Until you do this, the fable is a mere matter of words. When you can realize in feeling, as well as recognize in thought, the strength of the desire for air present in that youth, then, and then only, will you be able to manifest in expression a similar degree of desire for the objects of your prime wants and wantos. Do not rest satisfied with the intellectual recognition of the condition, induce the corresponding emotional feeling in yourself to as great a degree as possible. Varying the illustration, you will do well to induce in yourself, in imagination, the realization of the insistent, paramount desire for food experienced by the starving man lost in the dense forest in midwinter. The chances are that you never have been actually hungry, in the true sense of the term. All that you have mistaken for hunger is merely the call of appetite or taste, the result of habit. When you are so hungry that an old, stale, dry crust of bread will be delicious to your taste, then you are beginning to know what real hunger is. Those men who, lost in the forest or shipwrecked, have tried to satisfy intense hunger by gnawing the bark of trees, or chewing bits of leather cut from their boots, these men could give you some interesting information concerning hunger. If you can imagine the feelings of men in this condition, then you may begin to understand what insistent desire really means. Again, the shipwrecked sailors adrift at sea with their supply of water exhausted, or the desert-lost man wandering over the hot sands with a thirst almost inconceivable to the ordinary person, those men know what insistent desire means. Man can live many days without food, but only a few days without water, and only a few minutes without air. When these fundamental essentials of life are withdrawn temporarily, the living creature finds his strongest and most elemental feelings and desires aroused. They become transmuted into passions insistently demanding satisfaction and content. When these elemental emotions and desires are thoroughly aroused, all the derivative emotional states are forgotten. Imagine the emotional state of the starving man in sight of food, or the thirst-cursed man within reach of water, if some other person or thing intervenes and attempts to frustrate the suffering man's attainment of that which he wants above all else at that time. Other examples of insistent desire may be found in the cases of wild animals in the mating season, in which they will risk life and defy their powerful rivals in order to secure the chosen mate. If you ever have come across a bull moose in the mating season, you will have a vivid picture and idea of this phase of elemental desire raised to the point of insistent demand. Again, consider the intense emotional feeling, and the accompanying desires experienced by the mother creature in connection with the welfare and protection of her young when danger threatens them. This will show you the nature and desire power character of elemental desire aroused to its fullest extent. Even tiny birds will fight against overwhelming odds in resisting the animal or man seeking to rob their nests. It is a poor-spirited mother animal which will not risk her life, and actually court death, in defense of her young. The female wild creature becomes doubly formidable when accompanied by her young. The female of the species is far more deadly than the male when the welfare of its young is involved. The Orientals have a proverb, "It is a very brave, or a very foolish, man who will try to steal a young tiger cub while its mother is alive and free in the vicinity." We have called your attention to the above several examples and illustrations of the force of strongly aroused elemental emotions and desires, not alone to point out to you how powerful such desires and feelings become under the appropriate circumstances and conditions, but also to bring you to a realization of the existence within all living things of a latent emotional strength and power which is capable of being aroused into a strenuous activity under the proper stimulus, and of being directed towards certain definite ends and purposes indicated by the stimulus. That this strength and power is aroused by, and flows out toward, the particular forms of stimulus above indicated is a matter of common knowledge. But that it may be aroused to equal strength, power, and intensity by other forms of stimulus, such stimulus having been deliberately placed before it by the individual, is not known to the many, only the few have learned this secret. We ask you to use your imagination here, once more, for a moment. Imagine an individual who has his mind set upon the attainment of a certain end or purpose to such a degree that he has aroused the latent desire power within him to that extent where he wants to that end or purpose in the degree of strength, power, insistency, and fierceness, manifested by the drowning man who wants air, by the desert lost man who wants water, by the starving man who wants food, by the wild creature who wants its mate, by the mother animal who wants the welfare of its young. This is the individual in whom the elemental desire power has been aroused to such an extent, and directed toward the attainment or achievement of his dominant desire. How would you like to compete with such a man for the attainment of that object of his desire power? How would you like to be the opposing obstacle standing directly in his path of progress and attainment? How would you like to play with him the part analogous to that of one who would try to snatch away the bone from a starving wolf, or pull the tiger cub from the paws of its savage mother? This is an extreme case or illustration, of course. Very few individuals actually reach the stage indicated, though it is not impossible by any means, but many travel a long way along that road. The strong, successful men who have made good, who have arrived, who have done things, in any line of human endeavor, will be found to have traveled quite a distance in that direction, on the road of desire. They have aroused within themselves the strong, elemental desire power which abides in latency in the depths of the mental and emotional being, the soul, if you will, of every human creature, and have caused that elemental force to pour through the channels of the particular dominant desires which they have brought to the surface of their nature from the depths of the subconscious self. Look in any direction you may, and you will find that the strong, masterful, dominant, successful men are those in whom desire power has been aroused and directed in this way. These men know what they want, just as the drowning man, the starving man, the thirst-cursed man, the wild mating creature, the mother creature, each knows what he or she wants. They have no doubts concerning their dominant desires. And these men also want hard enough that which represents their dominant desires, just as did the drowning man, the starving man, and the rest of our illustrative examples. And, like those examples, these men were also willing to pay the price. Run over the list of the successful men and women with whose careers you are acquainted. Place on that list the great discoverers, inventors, explorers, military men, businessmen, artists, literary men and women, all those who have done things successfully. Then check off name after name, as you discover the biographical report of the desire power manifested by these individuals. You will find that in each and every case there were present the definite ideals, insistent desire, confident expectation, persistent determination, and balanced compensation, which constitute the master formula of attainment of our instruction. And this second requisite, the insistent desire, is found to be this elemental desire power directed into the appropriate channels of manifestation and expression. These individuals knew just what they wanted it hard enough, and they were willing to pay the price. It is this spirit of wanting it hard enough that distinguishes the men and women of strong purpose and determination from the common herd of persons who merely wish for things in a gentle, faint, conventional way, that distinguishes the true wanters from the dilettante wishers. It was the recognition of this spirit in men that caused Disraeli to say that long meditation had brought him to the conviction that a human being with a settled purpose, and with a will which would stake even existence itself upon its fulfillment, must certainly accomplish that purpose. But, you may say, admitting the truth of your premise, how am I to proceed in order to arouse the dormant latent desire power within me, and to cause it to flow forth in the direction of the attainment of my dominant desires? Answering the question, we would say, begin at the very beginning, and proceed to arouse and draw forth the latent desire power, by presenting to it the stimulus of suggestive and inciting ideas and pictures. For, from beginning to end, there prevails the principle expressed in that axiom of psychology which says, desire is aroused and flows forth toward things represented by ideas and mental pictures. The stronger and clearer the idea or mental picture, the stronger and more insistent is the aroused desire, all else being equal. You should proceed to apply this principle from the very beginning, even at the stage of semi-awakened desire power. There abides within you a great store of latent, dormant desire power, a great reservoir of desire power which is almost dormant, but which contains within itself the latent and nascent powers of wonderfully diversified manifestation and expression. You will do well to begin by stirring up this great reservoir of desire power, arousing it into activity in a general way, to the end that you may afterward direct its power and cause it to flow forth into and along the channels of expression and manifestation which you have provided for it. In the great crater of a mighty volcano of Hawaii, in plain sight of the daring visitor to the rim of the abyss, there abides a large lake of molten lava, seething and bubbling, boiling and effervescing in a state of hissing ebullience, a lake of liquid fire, as it were. This great fiery lake is comparatively calm on its surface, however, the ebullition proceeding from its depths. The whole body of fiery liquid manifests a rhythmic tide-like rise and fall, and a swaying from side to side of the crater. The observer is impressed with the recognition of a latent and nascent power of almost immeasurable possibilities of manifestation and expression. He feels borne upon him the conviction that this seething, rising and falling, swaying, tremendous body of liquid fire, if once fully aroused into activity, would boil and seethe up to the edge of the crater, and overflowing would pour down into the valleys beneath, carrying before it and destroying every obstacle in its path. This great lake of molten lava, this great body of liquid fire, is a symbol of the great body of latent and nascent desire power abiding within every individual, within you. It rests there, comparatively inactive on the surface, but ever manifesting a peculiar churning ebullition proceeding from its great depths. It seethes and boils, effervesces and bubbles, rises and falls in tide-like rhythm, sways in rhythmic sequence from side to side. It seems ever to say to you, I am here, restless and disturbed, ever longing, craving, hankering for, hungering and thirsting for, desiring for expression and manifestation in definite form and direction. Stir me up, arouse my inner force, set me into action, and I will rise and assert my power, and accomplish for you that which you direct. In this stage of desire power, its most general stage, you will be filled with a vague discontent and dissatisfaction, a longing, wishing, lusting for, and striving toward expression manifestation of some kind, though you know not just what it is you want nor just what you wish to do. The inclination and urge is there, but the direction is lacking. Here, desire power manifests in but a vague sense of unrest, in an almost unconscious urge and striving toward outward expression, in an almost unconscious inclination or tendency toward outward manifestation and action toward more or less definite ends. But even here there is the presence of idea which has stirred up and is calling forth the latent and nascent desire power, but that idea is merely that of a general urge toward outward expression and manifestation. It arouses but a general discontent with the present state, accompanied by the conative urge toward the achievement of a better condition, state, or channel of expression. Some good teachers maintain that there is no possible development of desire power at this stage, and, indeed, no need for it. But we, the present writers, feel that this is a mistake. We believe that even at this early stage or phase of desire power, it is possible to arouse and stimulate it into activity, to the end that it may later be directed into definite channels of expression and manifestation. Moreover, we believe that nature has proceeded in just this way in her numerous sharp advances, rises, and jumps in the evolutionary process, in which the living things have made progress at a rate far beyond the normal. We believe that nature has caused a bubbling over at such periods, and has caused the overflowing desire power to seek new and wider channels of manifestation. Of course, we realize that this stirring up or agitation of your latent desire power is apt to, in fact, certainly will, create additional discontent on your part, but what of it? Some philosophers praise the spirit of contentment, and say that happiness is to be found only therein. Be that as it may be as positively asserted that all progress proceeds from discontent. It is, of course, very philosophical to follow the advice, if you can't have what you like, you must like what you have. This idea produces a certain feeling of content. But we would add to the aphorism the following qualifying clause, viz., but you can't be sure that you can't have what you like, until you have exhausted all possible means of getting it. While admitting the value of content, at the same time we believe in preaching the gospel of discontent to a sane degree and extent. We believe that discontent is the first step on the path of attainment. We believe that it is just this very divine discontent that causes men and women to undertake the divine adventure of life, and which is back of and under all human progress. Content may be carried quite too far. Absolute content results in apathy and lethargy. It stops the wheels of progress. Nature evidently is not content, else it would cease to manifest the process of evolution. Nature has evidently been ever filled with the spirit of discontent, judging from her invariable manifestation of the law of change. Without discontent and the desire to change, there would be no change in nature. The law of change shows plainly nature's opinion on the subject, and her prevailing feelings and desires in the matter. You will do well to begin by treating your great body of elemental desire power for increased activity, and for the transmutation of its static power into dynamic power, bringing it from its state of semi-rest into the state of increased restlessness and tendency to flow forth into action. You may do this in the same way that you will later employ in the case of specific, particular, and definite desires, i.e., by presenting to it suggestive and inciting ideas and mental pictures. Begin by presenting to your elemental desire power the suggestive idea and mental picture of itself as akin to the great lake of molten lava, or liquid fire, filled with latent and nascent energy, power, and force, filled with the elemental urge toward expression and manifestation in outward form and action, able and willing to accomplish anything it desires to do with sufficient strength, providing a definite channel is provided for its flow of power. Show it the picture of itself as ready and willing to transmute its static energy into dynamic force, and to pour forth along the channels which you will provide for it, and above all else, quite able to do this if it will but arouse itself into dynamic action. In short, present to its gaze your idealistic and ideative mental equipment in the form of the surface of a great mirror, reflecting the picture of the elemental desire power as it presents itself to that mirror, let desire power see itself as it is. Supply desire with its complementary idea. You will do well to accompany this mental picture with a verbal statement or affirmation of the details of that picture. Treat your elemental desire power as if it were an entity. There is a valid psychological reason for this, by the way, and tell it in exact words just what it is, what are its powers, and what is its essential nature, displaying the disposition to express and manifest itself in outward form and activity. Pound these suggestive statements into it, as firmly, earnestly and persistently as you can. Supply the desire power with the element of idea and mental pictures. Give it the picture of what it is, and the pattern or diagram of what it can do if it will. The result of this course of treatment applied to your elemental desire power will soon show itself in an increased feeling of more vigorous rhythmic tidal movement and side-to-side movement, as previously described, and in an increased rate and vigor of its seething, boiling, effervescing ebullition. From its depths will arise mighty impulses and urges, upheavals and uprisings. The great molten lake of desire power will begin to boil with increased vigor, and will show an inclination to produce the steam of will. You will experience new and strange evidences of the urge of desire power within you, seeking expression and manifestation along the channels which you have provided for it. As yet, however, the desires will not have taken on definite form or direction. They will manifest merely in the state which has been called that of raw desire, the great elemental general desire power immanent in all things. But before reaching this stage, you must have created the channels through and in which you wish the overflowing desire power to flow when it reaches the boiling over stage. These channels must be built along the lines of those desires which you have proved to be your dominant desires. Build these channels, deep, wide and strong. From them you can afterward build minor channels for your secondary and derivative desires arising from your dominant desires. At present, however, your main concern is with your main channels. Let each channel represent the clear, deep, strong idea and mental picture of just what you want as you clearly see and know it. You have found out exactly what you want, when you want it, and how you want it. Let your channels represent as closely as may be just these ideas. Build the banks high, so as to obviate any waste. Build the walls strong, so as to stand the strain. Build the channel deep and wide, so as to carry the full force and quantity of the current. By creating the channels of your dominant desires, we mean establishing the paths to be traversed by the overflowing current of desire power which you have aroused from its latent and nascent condition. These channels or paths are created mentally by the employment of creative imagination and ideation. These mental forces proceed to manifest in the direction of creating and presenting to your consciousness the ideas and mental pictures of your dominant desires which you have discovered in your process of self-analysis. The work of creating these channels is really but a continuation of the mental work performed by you in the discovery of your dominant desires. In creating these channels you should observe 3 general rules, as follows. 1. Make the channels clear and clean by creating and maintaining a clear, clean, distinct, and definite idea of each of your dominant desires, in which idea the entire thought concerning the dominant desire is condensed and in which there is no foreign or non-essential material. 2. Make the channels deep and wide by forming mental pictures or suggestive ideas appealing to the emotional feelings associated with the dominant desires, and thus tempting the appetites of those desires by the representation of the objects of their longing, and by the presentation of imaginative pictures of the joys which will attend their final achievement and attainment. 3. Make the bank strong by means of the employment of the persistent determination of the will, so that the powerful swift current may be confined within the limits of the dominant desire and not be permitted to escape and waste itself by scattering its energy and force over the surrounding land. When your current is flowing freely, you will find it necessary to build minor channels serving to bring about the attainment of objects and ends helpful to the accomplishment of the objects and ends of the major channels. In building these minor channels, follow the same general rules and principles which we have given you. From the great main channels down to the tiniest canal the same principle is involved. Always build clear and clean, by means of definite ideas and aims. Always build deep and wide, by means of suggestive ideas and mental pictures. Always build strong banks, by means of the determined will. In concluding this consideration of the second requisite, i.e., the element of wanting it hard enough, we wish to impress upon your mind the tremendous vitalizing and inciting power exerted by suggestive ideas and mental pictures upon desire power. Suggestive ideas and mental pictures act upon desire power with a tremendous degree of effect in the direction of inciting, arousing, stirring, stimulating, exciting, spurring, goading, provoking, moving, encouraging, animating, and urging to expression and manifestation. There are no other incentives equal to these. All strong desires are aroused by such incentives, consciously or unconsciously applied. For instance, you may have no desire to visit California. Then your interest in that part of the country is aroused by what you read or hear concerning it, and a vague desire to visit it is aroused in you. Later, information in the direction of giving you additional material for suggestive ideas and mental pictures serves to arouse your desire to go to California. You begin to search eagerly for further ideas and pictures, and the more you obtain, the stronger grows the flame of your desire. At last, you want to hard enough, and brushing aside all obstacles you pay the price and take the trip across the plains. Had you not been furnished with the additional suggestive ideas and mental pictures, your original desire would soon have died out. You know by experience the truth of this principle. You also know how you would use it if you wish to induce a friend to visit California, do you not? Then start to work using it on your desire power when you wish to incite it into wanting hard enough, something that you know to be advantageous to you. It is customary to illustrate this principle by the figure of pouring the oil of idea upon the flame of desire, thereby keeping alive and strengthening the power of the latter. The figure of speech is a good one, the illustration serves well its purpose. But your memory and imagination, representing your experience, will furnish you with one a little nearer home. All that you need do is to imagine the effect which would be produced upon you if you were hungry and were able to form the mental picture or create the suggestive idea of a particularly appetizing meal. Even as it is, though you are not really hungry, the thought of such a meal will make your mouth water. Again, you may readily imagine the effect produced upon you, when you are parched and intensely thirsty on a long ride, by the vivid mental picture or strong suggestive idea of a clear, cold spring of mountain water. Or, again, when in a stuffy, ill-ventilated office you think of the fresh air of the mountain camp where you went fishing last summer, when you picture plainly the joys of the experience, can you deny that your desire power is intensely aroused and excited, and that you feel like dropping everything and taking to the woods at once? Raising the principle to its extreme form of manifestation, try to imagine the effect upon the famishing man of a dream of plentiful food, the dream of the thirst-cursed man in which is pictured flowing fountains of water. Try to imagine the effect upon the mate-seeking wild bull-moose of the far-off bellow of the sought-for mate. Would you like to impede his path on such an occasion? Finally, picture the emotional excitement and frenzy of desire on the part of the tigress when she comes in sight of food for her half-starved cubs, or her force of desire when she hears afar off the cry of distress of her young ones. In order to want to as hard as do these human beings and wild things which we have employed as illustrations, you must feed your desire power with suggestive ideas and mental pictures similar in exciting power to those which rouse into action their dominant and paramount want to. Of course, these are extreme cases, but they serve to illustrate the principle involved. In short, in order to want it hard enough, you must create a gnawing hunger and a parching thirst for the objects of your dominant desires. This you must intensify and render continuous by repeatedly presenting with suggestive ideas and mental pictures of the feast of good things, and the flowing fountain, which awaits the successful achievement or attainment of the desires. Or, you must be like the half-drowned youth wanting a breath of air, above all else, wanting it with all the fierce energy of his soul and being, and you must ever keep before you the suggestive idea and mental picture of all the air there is, which is to be found just above the surface of the water of need in which you are now immersed. When you can create these mental and emotional conditions within yourself, then, and then only, will you really know just what it is to want hard enough. Think well over this idea, until you grasp its full meaning. Paying the price. According to the master formula, in order to get what you want, you must not only know exactly what you want, not only want it hard enough, but also be willing to pay the price of its attainment. We have considered the first and the second of these elements of successful attainment. Let us now consider the third one, and learn what it means to be willing to pay the price of attainment. This final element of successful attainment, this last hurdle in the race, often is the point at which many persons fail. Riding gallantly over the first several hurdles, they stumble and fall when they attempt to surmount this final one. This, not so much because of the real difficulty in passing over this obstacle, but rather because they are apt to underestimate the task and, accordingly, to relax their energies. Thinking that the race is practically over, they fail to observe care and caution and thus meet failure. With the prize almost in hand, they relax their efforts and lose it. The law of compensation is found in full operation in the realm of desire, as well as in every other field and region of life and action. There is always present that insistence upon balance which nature invariably demands from those who seek her prizes. There is always something to be given up, in order that something else may be gained. One cannot have his pie and his dime at the same time. He must spend the dime if he would buy the pie. Neither can one keep his dime and yet spend it. Nature boldly and plainly displays her sign, pay the price. Once more let us quote the old adage, said the gods to man, take what thou wilt, but pay the price. When in actual experience you perform the process of selection of the dominant desires, with its attendant struggle for existence and survival of the fittest among the competing desires, even then you are beginning to pay the price of the attainment of your dominant desires, this because you are setting aside and relinquishing one or more sets of desires in favor of a preferred set. Every set of desires has its opposing set, and also other sets which would to some extent interfere with its full manifestation. You must pay the price of attainment of the one set of desires by relinquishing the other sets. In order to attain the object of your desire for wealth, you must pay the price of relinquishing desires for certain things which would prevent you from accumulating money. In order to attain the object of your desire for all possible knowledge in some particular field of study and research, you must pay the price of relinquishing your desires for a similar degree of knowledge in some other field of thought and study. In order to attain the object of your desire for business success, you must pay the price of hard work and the passing by of the objects of your desires for play, amusement, and enjoyment which would necessitate the neglect of your business. And so on. To attain the object of any one set of desires, you must always pay the price of the relinquishing of the objects of other sets of desires. In some cases, this process of the inhibition of opposing desires is akin to that of weeding your garden, or of pruning your trees, getting rid of the useless and harmful growths which interfere with the growth and development of the useful and advantageous thing. In other cases, however, the desires which you must inhibit and put away from you are not in themselves harmful or useless. On the contrary, they may be very advantageous and useful in themselves, and may be actually worthy of being adopted as dominant desires by others, but, at the same time, they are of such a nature as to prove an obstacle to your progress along the line of your own chosen dominant desires. Things may oppose and antagonize each other without either of them being harmful or bad in themselves. You cannot travel at the same time both forks of the road, nor can you travel north and south on any road at the same time, though either of these courses of travel may be good in itself. You cannot very well be a successful clergyman and a successful lawyer at the same time. If you have strong desires for both of these careers, you must choose the one you desire more and set aside the other. The girl with the two attractive suitors, the man with the two delightful sweethearts, the child with the dime, gazing longingly at the two different tarts, each must choose one and pass by the other, and thus, pay the price. Not only in the preliminary process of discovering and identifying your dominant desires are you called upon to pay the price, but you are equally called upon to do so at almost every subsequent step and stage of your progress in actual experience. There is always something presenting itself to tempt you into sidetracking your desire power, some alluring desires which beckon you from the straight path of attainment. Here you will find that it is hard to pay the price, and often you will gravely question yourself, asking if the things represented by the dominant desires are, after all, worth the price you are being called on to pay for them. These temptations and struggles come to all. They constitute one of the tests whereby it is determined whether you are strong or whether you are weak in regard to your desire power. Here is the real test of whether or not you want it hard enough to make you willing to pay the price. Particularly difficult to overcome and conquer are those temptations which induce you to relinquish your desire for future attainment in favor of the gratification of present desires, or which tempt you to forego the attainment of permanent future benefits in favor of temporary, ephemeral present benefits. The tempter whispers in your ear that you are foolish to content yourself with the skim milk of the present in the hope of obtaining the full cream of tomorrow. The ever-present suggestion to eat, drink, and be merry, for tomorrow we die, must be boldly confronted and conquered if you wish to attain the object of that which your reason and judgment, as well as your self-analysis, has shown that you really want above everything else. The habit of saying, "Get thee behind me, Satan," must be cultivated, and when you have got him behind you, look out lest he give you a push from behind. Here you determine whether or not you really want it hard enough. The drowning man is in no doubt concerning the value of the breath of air. He is willing to pay the price of it, no matter how high that price may be. The famishing man knows the value of food, the parched man knows the value of water. They are willing to pay the price, and are not liable to be sidetracked from their dominant desire. The bull moose seeking his mate is willing to pay the price of danger and possible death lying in his path, but you cannot sidetrack him. The mother tiger cannot be sidetracked from the pursuit of food for her hungry cubs. She is willing to pay the price of risk of life without hesitation. When you begin to want it hard enough, along the same lines, and reaching toward the same degree of intensity and insistence manifested by these creatures, then you will not hesitate to pay the price, to pay it in full, and without hesitation. When you reach this stage, the tempter will whisper into ears deaf to his voice. In order to hold the current of desire power within the bounds of your channels of dominant desire, the banks must be erected and kept in a state of strength by will power. The will to will must be called into manifestation. While desire is one of the fundamental elements of will, it is not all of will. Will is a subtle combination of conative desire and of purposeful determination. It springs from desire, but it evolves into something which is capable of mastering desire by its power of willing to will. In the book of this series entitled Will Power, the subject of will in all of its phases is considered in detail. Those who are specially interested in this phase of the general subject are referred to the said book. It should prove helpful to them. Here follow 3 general rules which you should note very carefully in connection with the subject of inhibiting and setting aside the temptations of conflicting desires, of those desires which are constantly springing up and tempting you to forego paying the price, or to become sidetracked from the path of attainment of your dominant desires. 2 of these rules are along the lines of which we have spoken in connection with the influence of representative ideas upon desire power. Under temptation by sidetracking desires, use every effort to feed the flame of desire of your dominant desires, by an increased supply of suggestive ideas and mental pictures tending to stimulate its beat and incite its energy. 2. At the same time, strenuously avoid feeding the flame of the tempting desires by suggestive ideas and mental pictures likely to arouse or incite them. On the contrary, carefully and positively refuse to admit such ideas and pictures to your mind so far as is possible. Seek to starve the fires of such desires by withholding from them the fuel necessary for their continuance and support. The 3rd rule involves another psychological principle, and is as follows. 3. So far as is possible, transmute the sidetracking desires into forms more in accordance with the general trend of the dominant desires, thereby converting them into helpful rather than harmful emotional energy. In the case of the first rule above stated, you tend to inhibit the energy of the sidetracking desires by imparting additional energy to the dominant desires. When the attention is strongly attracted or held by the suggestive ideas and mental pictures of a strong set of desires, it is not easily diverted by those of a weaker set. The strong light of the former tend to cast the latter into a comparative shadow. The attention firmly concentrated and held upon one particular set of ideas and mental pictures refuses to accept the demand of another set. Keep the attention busy with the advantageous set, and it will have no time for the consideration of the opposing set. With these opposing suggestive ideas and mental pictures kept out of the field of conscious attention, the desires associated with them tend to die down and finally to disappear. In the case of the second rule above stated, you deliberately and determinately refuse to feed the flame of the sidetracking desires with the fuel of suggestive ideas and mental pictures. Instead, you proceed deliberately and determinately to starve that flame. No flame of desire can long continue to burn vigorously if its supply of suggestive fuel be cut off from it. Cut off the fuel supply of any desire, and it will begin to decrease in vigor and force. Refuse to allow your mind to dwell upon the ideas or mental pictures tending to suggest the sidetracking desires. When such ideas and pictures intrude themselves and seek to attract the attention, you must deliberately turn your attention to something else, preferably to the suggestive ideas and pictures of your dominant desires. The Roman Catholic Church evidently recognizes the value of this rule, for its teachers instruct their pupils to form the habit of turning their attention to prayers and certain forms of devotional exercises when temptations assail them. The attention being directed to and held firmly upon the devotional exercise or ceremony, it is withheld from the suggestive ideas and mental pictures of the tempting desire, and, accordingly, the latter loses strength and in time dies away. Without detracting from the value of the religious element involved, we may say that it is certain that the purely psychological effect of such course is highly advantageous. You would do well to apply the principle in your own case. In the case of the third rule above stated, you transmute the energy of the sidetracking desire into that of desires more in accordance with the general trend of your dominant desires. In this way you not only obviate the danger of the interference and distraction of the sidetracking desires, but also actually employ the basic energy of desire power to feed the flame of the advantageous desires. Here, the principle involved is not so well known as are those involved in the other rules, but that principle is sound, nevertheless, and is capable of being employed with remarkable results by the individual possessing sufficient will power and determination to apply it. As an example of this principle of the transmutation of the form of desire force, let us point you to a fact well known to scientific observers, viz., that the energy of the sexual passions may be transmuted into the energy of any kind of mental or physical creative work. This fact is also known to priests and others who are called on for advice from those wishing to control passions of this kind. The explanation probably lies in the fact that sexual desire is essentially creative in its fundamental nature, and therefore is capable of being diverted to other forms of creative activity. But whatever may be the true explanation, it is a fact that the person experiencing strong intruding sexual desires may proceed to master and control them by means of engaging in some form of creative work in which the elemental creative energy is transmuted into other forms of creative force. For instance, one may create by writing, musical composition, artistic work, or making and constructing things with the hands, in fact, by any kind of work in which things are made, put together, constructed, or created in any way. In all of such work, provided that sufficient interest is thrown into the task, it will be found that the strong impulse of the intruding sexual passions will gradually lose its force, and that the person will then experience a sense of new energy in the creative work which he has undertaken in order to transmute the previous form of desire power. The experienced physician knows that the best possible prescription for certain classes of cases of this kind coming to him for treatment and advice is that of interesting work for head or hands or both. There is much truth in the old saying that an idle brain is the devil's workshop, and the similar one that the devil finds plenty of work for idle hands to do. This principle may be set to work against the devil by simply reversing its action by giving head and hands plenty to do. Another illustration of this principle is found in the case of the beneficial effect of certain games, in fact, of nearly all games played in moderation. Here the sidetracking and distracting desires which seek to take one away from his appointed tasks, and from the manifestation of his dominant desires, are transmuted into the interest, feeling, and desires of play. Play is a safety valve of emotional feeling. It serves to transmute many a distracting desire into the conative energy expressing itself in an interesting game. This is true of games involving purely mental skill, as well as those in which physical skill is also involved. Baseball has been a wonderful benefit to the American people in this way. Golf is playing an important part in the direction of affording a transmutation channel of energy for busy men who tire under the somewhat monotonous strain of the strenuous pursuit of the object of their dominant desires. In cases of this kind, not only are the distracting desires transmuted in this way, but the games themselves give recreation, exercise, and a restful change of occupation to the individual. Paying the price of your dominant desires does not necessarily imply that you must give up everything in life not actually concerned in furthering the interests of those particular desires. In such case, indeed, you would probably actually injure your own interests by too closely restricting your circle of interest and attention. The real meaning of the injunction is that you must pay the price of giving up, inhibiting, or at least transmuting any and all desires which, directly and certainly oppose and seriously interfere with the attainment of the objects of your dominant desires. That price, indeed, you must be prepared to pay. In many cases, such desires may be transmuted into forms which will in a sense run along with the pursuit of the objects of your dominant desires, and thus be rendered helpful rather than harmful. Many emotional elements may be turned to account in this way by the process of transmutation. You should give some thought to this matter of transmutation when you are threatened by distracting and sidetracking desires. Another form of paying the price is that of the labor and work to be performed by the individual in his task of attainment of the object of his dominant desires. This work and labor, however, is not alone performed by the exercise of the persistent determination of the will, though this is the active element involved. There is needed also the inhibition and starving out of the conflicting or sidetracking desires which strive to draw the individual away from his appointed tasks and toward the actions requiring less work, and which for the time being seem to be richer in promise of pleasure and satisfaction. The price paid by the men and women who have achieved marked success almost always is found to include self-denial, and sometimes even actual privation during the earlier days of the undertaking. Work far in excess of that rightfully demanded of the wage earner, both in amount and in time is demanded of them, application and unwearied perseverance are required of them, indomitable resolution and persistent determination must be paid by them. There is here the constant giving up of the present pleasure in favor of that hoped for in the future. There is here the constant performance of tasks which might easily be avoided, and which are really avoided by the average person, but which are required to be performed by the individual who is inspired by the dominant desire and who is working for the accomplishment of the one big thing. Napoleon paid the price in his earlier days when he refused to indulge in the frivolous pursuits of his fellow students at Brienne, and instead, deliberately devoted his spare time to the mastery of the elements of military science and history. Abraham Lincoln paid the price when he studied the few books he could find by the light of the fireplace, instead of indulging in the pleasures and dissipations of the other young men of his neighborhood. Read the history of any successful man and you will find this invariable, paying the price of study, application, work, self-denial, economy, thrift, industry, and the rest of the needful things. Never delude yourself with the thought that you can escape paying the price of the attainment of the objects of your strong desires. The price must always be paid. The greater the object of attainment, the greater is the price demanded. But you will find that if you have learned how to want it hard enough, then the price will be comparatively easy to pay, the thing will be deemed well worth it. If you feel that the price that you are being called upon to pay for the object of your dominant desires is more than the thing is worth, then there is something wrong about the whole matter. In such case, you should carefully take stock of your feelings, weighing and comparing them carefully as we have suggested in our consideration of self-analysis and selection of dominant desires. You may find that what you had supposed to be a dominant desire is not really such at all. Or you may find that you have failed to include some necessary element or phase of the dominant desire. Or, that you have failed to make some possible transmutation of distracting desires, or have failed to inhibit or starve out sidetracking desires. Or, possibly, that you have failed to feed the flame of your dominant desire properly. At any rate, there is something wrong in such a case, and you should seek the remedy. While the law of nature provides that you must pay the price of the attainment of any and all desires, it also provides that the attainment must always be worth the price. If you find that the present and probable future value of any object of your desire is not worth the price you must be called upon to pay for it, then you should carefully consider the whole matter most critically, viewing it from all angles, and in the light of all possible relations and associations, with full deliberation concerning the probable consequences of an opposite course, and with thoughtful judgment concerning all alternative courses. The dissatisfaction may be merely temporary in passing, or on the other hand, it may be growing in strength and promise of permanency. Any desire which upon careful consideration, deliberation, and judgment may seem not to pay for its keep, to be not worth its storage charges or floor space in your emotional nature, is a fit object for a final retrial upon its merits, a revaluation of its points, in order to decide whether it shall be retained and treated for additional strength, energy, and emotional value, or else discarded and rejected. The test should always be, is this really worthwhile, worth the price I am called on to pay for it? Would its rejection cost me more than its retention? The touchstone of merit should be, does this render me stronger, better, and more efficient, and, therefore, more truly and permanently happier? In the history of philosophy we find many theories concerned with the matter of the satisfaction of pleasurable desires and the avoidance of pain, the achievement of the greatest possible amount and degree of contenting of the spirit of the individual. The ancient Greek philosophers especially devoted much attention to this particular subject, but they failed to come to a common understanding. The Epicureans held that the chief end of life is to obtain the greatest satisfaction of the pleasurable desires. The Stoics, on the contrary, held that the chief end of life is to avoid and escape pain. Between these two poles raged the conflict of thought on the subject. Some emphasize the fact that an excess of pleasure brings about a reaction of satiety and even actual pain, while even in continued pain there is to be found a compensating element of resignation and inner content of a spiritual nature. Here, as elsewhere, the truth seems to lie between the two extremes, at the point of the golden mean. Nothing too much is the axiom of those who perceive the danger of proceeding to extremes in anything. They hold that while the satisfaction of the pleasurable desires is proper and good, yet there is an element of benefit even in a moderate degree of pain. Without pain, they say, there is no contrast by reason of which pleasure is appreciated. The escape from pain, or the avoidance of pain, is doubly pleasurable when the nature of the pain is known by experience. But, even here, we find the tacit admission that the chief end of life is the attainment of happiness, the content of the spirit, for which all living things, consciously or unconsciously strive. Perhaps the most practical of all the philosophical theories upon the subject of the securing of the maximum of pleasure and the minimum of pain is that theory without a name, but which is followed by many of the strongest and most successful men of the world. This theory combines the principles of both Epicureanism and of Stoicism, and seemingly blends them in a practical harmony. The cardinal principle of this practical philosophy may be expressed in the following adage: sacrifice the lesser pleasure to the greater, taking into consideration the element of permanency in ultimate value. If any desire is found to result in a greater degree of pain than of pleasure, sacrifice it, unless it contributes to the success of a greater desire. If it results in a greater degree of pleasure than of pain, preserve it, unless it tends to weaken or to interfere with the success of a greater desire. In the consideration of the above, you must never lose sight of the fact that the greater desires, or the greater pleasure, may consist of the satisfaction arising from the performance of duty, and of the practice of rational altruism. In fact, it often does so, for acts of duty, altruism, patriotism, self-sacrifice for an ideal, etc., are performed only when there is secured a greater content of spirit by the performance or practice, than by the opposite course. So, at the last, recognizing that you must always pay the price, you are justified in seeking to get the greatest satisfaction for the price paid, and to refuse to accept emotional goods which are not worth the price demanded for them. There should be observed an economy of desire, by means of which the law of compensation is made to yield a full return for every expenditure. You should always get your money's worth when you pay the price, and it behooves you to examine carefully the wares offered for sale on the counters of desire. If you find that you have any unprofitable desires, not worth the price which you are continually being called upon to pay for them, do not hesitate to scrap them at once. At least, strive to retain only such dominant desires as will in the end enable you to say, honestly, to yourself, it was well worth the price it cost, I am satisfied. You have seen that desire is that emotional state which is represented by the phrase, I want. You have seen that desire has for its object something which will bring pleasure or get rid of pain, immediate or remote, for the individual or for someone in whom he is interested. You have seen that you always act according to your greatest like or dislike of which you are cognizant at the time. You have seen that the degree of force, energy, will, determination, persistence, and continuous application manifested by an individual in his aspirations, ambitions, aims, performances, actions and work is determined primarily by the degree of his desire for the attainment of the objects thereof, his degree of want and want-to concerning that object. You have seen that desire is the flame that produces the steam of will, and that, therefore, desire is the source from which all human action springs. You have seen that not only does desire power directly or indirectly cause all human action, but that it also sets into operation the life forces which develop the mental and physical faculties and powers of the individual along lines designed to further and more efficiently manifest and express the dominant desires of the individual. You have seen how desire power presses into service the powers of the subconscious mentality in the work of manifesting and expressing the strong desires. You have seen how the subconscious powers act so as to attract to the individual the things, persons, conditions, and circumstances serving to enable him to better manifest and express his sovereign desires, and how, in the same way, they tend to attract the individual to those things, persons, conditions, and circumstances. You have seen how desire attraction works silently, even when one is asleep, toward the end impressed upon it by the character of the strong desires. You have discovered the importance of knowing exactly what you want, and have learned how to gain such important knowledge by self-analysis and selection. You have discovered the importance of wanting it hard enough, and have learned how to feed the flame of desire so as to cause it to burn fiercely. You have learned how to set into motion and activity the great body of elemental desire, and how to cause it to flow forth through the channels of manifestation and expression which you have carefully built for its flood. You have discovered the necessity of paying the price of attainment of the objects of your desire, and have learned the general rules concerning such payment. You have been informed concerning the tremendous power of the desire power within your being, and have become acquainted with the laws governing its manifestation and expression, and the rules regulating its control and direction. If you have entered into the spirit of this instruction, and have allowed its influence to descend into the subconscious depths of your mentality, you have already become aware of the aroused energy of the desire power in those depths. You will have found yourself filled with a new and unfolding consciousness of personal power within you. You will have experienced that intuitive feeling that there have been set into operation in you certain subtle but dynamic forces which will tend to make you stronger, better, and more efficient. As you proceed to arouse into further activity these great forces of your nature, and to direct their channel of manifestation and expression, you will from time to time receive actual evidence and proof that you are traveling along the right road, and are employing the proper methods. You will be astonished to receive proofs and actual results in the most unexpected manner, and from sources and directions never dreamt of before. You will realize more and more, as you proceed, that you have set into operation one of nature's most potent forces, in fact, the force of forces. Finally, you will begin to realize that the very actual presence within you of a dominant desire which has won its place in the struggle for existence, and which has stood all the tests, is practically the prophecy of its own fulfillment. Unconscious desire. No modern consideration of the general subject of desire power would be complete without at least a passing reference to the psychological theories and teachings of the Freudian school, the school popularly known under the name psychoanalysis. In the teachings of the founder of this school, Dr. Sigmund Freud, of Vienna, and in those of his followers, there is found the basic postulate of the unconscious, i.e., a subconscious psychical element of our mental being, the essence of which is desire manifesting along the lines of subconscious mentation. This unconscious desire is held to employ the forces and powers of the subconscious mentality in order to effect its purposes and to satisfy its longings. Freud employed the term libido to indicate the conative impulse of this unconscious desire. That term, however, having acquired a somewhat unpleasant connotation for English and American minds, the later writers in these two countries have frequently substituted the term craving. But whether it is called libido or craving, the same essential striving and conative impulse of unconscious desire is sought to be indicated, and this craving, striving, and impulse to action constitute the essential nature of the unconscious desire of the Freudian philosophy. Dr. Wilfrid Lay, one of the most popular American exponents of the Freudian philosophy, in his excellent work entitled Man's Unconscious Conflict, says of the power of unconscious desire, and of its essential nature. In the Greek mythology, the Titans are the children of earth and heaven and, because they warred with the gods, were cast into the Gulf of Tartarus, where they lie prostrate, but occasionally, becoming restive, they shake their bonds, and in so doing cause the earth to tremble. In each one of us there lives a Titan. As the Titans represented the crude forces of nature that were later brought into subjection by the gods who introduced a reign of order, so the Titan that is in each one of us represents the primal impulses of animal life which have through the ages been brought into some semblance of order by the force of society. But just as the Titans in the old mythology made themselves felt in disturbances of the equilibrium of the world, so sometimes do the Titans residing in us all break loose and do much damage in our daily life. And as the Titans were chained in the deep pit, and could never show their faces to the light of day, so these primordial vital forces are generally controlled by the restraints of organized society, and are as little in evidence to most people as if they, too, were chained at the bottom of a pit. Their writhings, however, are not without effect on our daily thoughts and on our bodily functions. That part of our mental life of which as a general rule we know nothing, but which exerts a great influence upon our actions, is known in the newer psychology as the unconscious, and in this book I frequently refer to it as the unknown Titan. Asterisk 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 asterisk. These two theories, first, that a large part of our mental life is unconscious, unknown or unknowable, and second, that a creative force, by whatever name it may be called, is constantly impelling all animate life, have been used together in working out the science of psychoanalysis. The prime mover of the human soul, then, is its continual craving for life, for love, and for action. Asterisk asterisk asterisk. The will to live, love and act, conditioned as it is by the power that has gone on living and loving and acting for countless generations, is the only source of all human strength. Thus, from the above-quoted statement concerning the nature and actions of the unconscious desire of the Freudians, you will see that the basic postulate of Freud and his followers is quite similar to that of Schopenhauer, von Hartmann, and others of the voluntaristic school of philosophy referred to in the preceding sections of this book. In fact, the Freudians have built upon the original foundations of older philosophers just mentioned. The latter, in turn, had built upon still older foundations of Buddha, Heraclitus, and others of the ancient schools of philosophy. In all of such teachings will be found the fundamental postulate of a universal something or somewhat, the very essence or kernel of nature, the inmost characteristic of which is an insistent desire, a craving, longing, striving, hungering, thirsting, moving toward action promising to content its spirit. In short, to employ the figure so often quoted by us in this instruction, it is a power with the desire to act, or a desire with the power to act. The Freudians, however, do not pursue the metaphysical road in their treatment of the unconscious desire, they prefer the nearer and safer highway of psychology. They emphasize the fact that in human life and behavior the unconscious desire is the predominant moving power. They labor strenuously to uncover the hidden unconscious sources for many of our supposed free, conscious actions, and in many cases they make out a very good case for the supremacy of the unconscious, though in others their explanations and conclusions seem to be more or less forced or even fantastic. Passing by the extreme and radical theories of some of this school, it must be admitted that its teachings have done a great work in revealing to us the hidden springs from which flow the streams of thought, feeling, and action which constitute our respective personalities. Likewise, they have bestowed upon the race certain valuable, efficient methods of correcting abnormalities and faults arising from the uncontrolled operations of the unconscious. The Freudians throw an interesting light upon the real causes of many of our common everyday actions which we fondly imagine that we are performing of our own free will and by reason of certain conscious motives. The teachers show us that these certain conscious motives are not at all the real motives of our actions. The real motives are to be found in certain far below the surface buried and hidden desires, cravings, longings, desires. These real motives are often completely concealed from us, and are revealed only through methods of psychoanalysis conducted along scientific lines. Our so-called reasons are often mere excuses or pretexts, evolved in order to quiet our minds and consciences while the unconscious desire proceeds to manifest and express itself through us. Ernest Jones, in his works treating upon the subject of psychoanalysis, employs the term rationalization to indicate that tendency on our part to ascribe a conscious reason or motive to those of our actions which are really caused and motivated by the wishes, desire, and craving of the unconscious. Lay also gives numerous examples of actions, which seem unaccountable, and indeed are unaccountable except on the grounds of their having been motivated by the unconscious wish. Freud gives the keynote of his general theory concerning the influence of our past experiences, and of the feelings resulting from them, upon our present thoughts, feelings, and actions, in his statement, "We are what we are because we have been what we have been." A writer on the subject adds, "Down in the dark hidden mental pit of the unconscious that even we ourselves do not know, and yet from which impulses are always springing and affecting our reactions to life, are many instinctive cravings, many antisocial, egotistic, jealous, hostile thoughts. We often have to repress them consciously, but much oftener they are unconsciously repressed. Sometimes a slip comes and they are revealed against our own will, at least discovered to those who understand something of the operation of the subconscious mind, an increasing number now." Dr. Drysdale says, "Experiences long buried and long forgotten continue to exercise a dynamic force in the life of individuals, influencing their reactions and apparent motives. They are subconscious undercurrents, repressed usually in the normal person, but active. In breaks such as lapses in speech, gaps in memory, the cue to the underlying repressed thought may often be found. Every experience possesses the power to reflect its influence upon our later life. No experience is ever wholly lost. Our present actions are to a large extent the outcome of antecedent acts or impressions. It must be admitted that life is a constant conflict between our natural instincts, motives and desires and the standards established by the society in which we move and have our being. We repress from conscious memory many experiences that date back to days of childhood, but they lurk in the mind subconsciously. Apparently long forgotten, it may be that the recollection of the incident will crop out at any time, resurrected by some idle word or fleeting thought, as a disturbing or antagonistic mental influence. We shall not go further in this brief consideration of the teaching of the Freudian school concerning the subject of unconscious desire as expressed and manifested by the unconscious or hidden self of the individual. In that volume of this series entitled Subconscious Power, we have explained the general teaching of that school, as well as having given a careful statement of the entire general subject of the subconscious, superconscious, or unconscious planes of mental activity. We recommend that book to your attention if you are especially interested in that particular phase of psychology. The more technical features of the Freudian teaching are foreign to the field and scope of the present instruction, and we must refer you to the special textbooks of that school for more detailed information concerning these. We have sought here merely to point out to you that the Freudian teaching is found to fit in with our general teaching concerning desire power. It serves to corroborate our basic theories, and to sustain our principal facts, rather than to oppose or contradict them. The better and more practical writers and teachers on the subject of the Freudian philosophy and psychoanalysis, instead of following the example of those other teachers who emphasize the abnormal and unpleasant phases of unconscious desire, strive rather to point out the benefits which may be secured by means of acquiring a control of unconscious desire and then setting its forces to work in your behalf rather than against your best interests. This, again, you will see is in accord with our own teachings. We have insisted early and late, from beginning to end, that you must be the master of your desire power, not its slave. Desire power, conscious or unconscious, may be a terrible master, but once you acquire control of it, it becomes your willing and faithful servant. Especially helpful and practical is the teaching of exponents of the Freudian philosophy concerning the process of sublimation, the process of sublimating the crude and gross desires into the finer metal approved of by the cultured and trained conscious mentality of the individual, just as the ancient alchemists sought to sublimate the baser metals into gold. The elemental force of desire power may be drawn through proper channels to higher levels of activity and accomplishment, there to be set to work in the direction of that which makes you stronger, better, and more efficient, and which also serves better the purposes of civilization and the welfare of the race. This teaching concerning sublimation also is found to accord with our own teaching as contained in the present book and others of this series. In fact, many of the methods set forth in these books, and presented to you in this instruction, are based upon this precise principle, i.e., that of transmutation or sublimation of the elemental desire power into the higher forms of its expression. In this book you have been asked to consider the facts which have been discovered concerning the nature, character and modes of activity of desire power, that great elemental psychic energy which is seen to pervade all existence and to be present universally. Analyze the actions of any or every living thing, and you will find desire power inspiring and motivating it. Nay, examine the motions of the so-called inanimate objects of nature, and you will find even there the energizing forces of something like desire power. If nature be regarded as a magnificent cosmic machine, then desire power is the motive power that runs that universal machinery. If nature be regarded as a living macrocosm, then desire power is the living motive power inspiring and causing its activities. From whatever angle nature may be viewed, under whatever hypothesis or theory it may be regarded, desire power is perceived to be the something or somewhat directly responsible for making the wheels go round. The old Hermetic axiom, as above, so below, as within, so without, as in great, so in small, is seen to apply here. The individual and the cosmos both are seen to have as their essential motive power that original, aboriginal, elemental, fundamental something which we know as desire power. In view of this fact, you scarcely need to be urged to study the methods of operation of this mighty force, so that you may harness it to your machinery of life and action. Like gravitation or electricity, its power is available to all who have the courage, intelligence, and perseverance to master it and to press it into service. It is as free as the air or the sunshine. It costs nothing to run your living machinery with it, nothing but persistence and determination. You do not have to supply it with power, or to add energy to it. It has within itself far more power, energy, or force than you will ever have occasion to make use of. All that you need do is to tap onto its free energy, and to set it to work for you in the direction of running the mental and physical machinery with which you have provided it. Let us ask you to consider the following remarkable statement of Dr. Wilfrid Lay, to whom we directed your attention in the first pages of the present section of this book. Speaking of the desire power of the unconscious, Dr. Lay says, "I call your attention to the enormous power of the unconscious. It is the accumulated desire in each one of us, of eons of evolution, the present form, in each individual, of that vital force which has kept itself immortal through thousands of generations of men behind us, and millions of generations of animals behind them. It need not be anything but a source of power to us, power that we can draw upon, if we rightly understand it, just as we can turn on power from a steam pipe or an electric wire. It need not be destructive, indeed it is not destructive, except in the most distracted souls, but on the contrary ought in each one of us, when we have learned to manage it rightly, to be as much and as completely at our command as is the power in the automobile. As in the automobile, there are a few simple things that we have to learn and the rest is furnished by the maker of the car, and we do ill to tamper with it. The experience of having a 50 horsepower auto placed at one's command, if it is to be driven by oneself, is a situation into which there are many persons, both men and women, who are very loath to enter. And similarly there are many persons who for various causes would not be willing to have developed the 50,000 generation power which resides in them. Asterisk 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 to all intents and purposes, and as far as human flesh is able to bear the strain, this power which is largely in the hands of the unconscious in most men and women is illimitable. Desire power is a cosmic force designed for the controlled and directed use of the strong. It is at the disposal of all, but only few are courageous and determined enough to avail themselves of its services. The masses of men merely dally with it, play with it, handle it gingerly. The masters of men boldly grasp its controlling levers, and turn its power into their mental and physical machinery. It is a master force fitted only for the service of masters. It is the rightful servant only of those whose slogan is, "I can, I will, I dare, I do." You can be a master of desire power, and thus a master of men, a master of circumstances, a master of life, if you but will to be so. You are the master of your fate, the captain of your soul, if you will but recognize, realize, and manifest the power of the I am I, which is your real self, and of which desire power is the willing servant. Faith power, your inspirational forces. The power of faith. In this book you are asked to consider the facts concerning the presence and manifestation of a most potent form of personal power, and, therefore, of that universal principle of power of which all personal power is the direct or indirect expression and manifestation. This form of personal power is one of the 5 great elements or factors involved in the expression and manifestation of personal power in general, the others being, respectively, ideative power, desire power, will power, and compensative power. This particular element or factor of personal power is equal in importance, efficacy, and power to either of the elements or factors which we have just mentioned. It is their peer and equal in every respect. Its name is faith power. You may experience a sense of surprise, mingled with incredulity, when you hear faith power mentioned as an equal of ideative power, desire power, will power, and compensative power, particularly of will power. You may, indeed, approach the consideration of this particular phase of personal power with mental reservations, and with lurking doubt concerning the value and importance, the power and efficacy, of faith power in this special connection. This, because to you the idea of faith has heretofore represented certain things, and involved certain meanings, which were not associated in your mind with the activities of the practical world of men and action. To you, faith has doubtless been a term properly applied in sermons and theological books, but which has but little or no practical place or meaning is the world of action and deeds, in the world in which most of us live most of our time, and perform most of our actions. But we hasten to assure you that the faith power which forms the subject matter of this book, is not at all the kind of faith power which you have in mind, and of which you are uncertain so far as is concerned its efficacy and power in practical everyday life. We assure you that the faith power of this book is something having a most intimate and important relation to personal power along practical lines, and is something which, in the current phrase, you need in your business. Moreover, we are certain that you will admit the truth of this contention by the time you finish the study of this book, or even when, much earlier in the study, you discover just what we mean by faith and faith power. The term faith, and the concept embodied in the term, has undergone a process of evolution in which several distinct stages are in evidence, and has finally been subjected to a division into several distinct concepts, each of which has its own particular meaning, import and significance. Originally, it seems to have been employed solely for the purpose of indicating fidelity to promise or duty, faithfulness, fealty, honesty, integrity, truth, constancy. Thus, one was said to act in good faith, to be faithful to his trust, to be faithful and true, in short to manifest the quality of faith in the direction of honesty of purpose, steadfastness, constancy and loyalty toward that or those to whom one was bound by duty, promise or honor. In time, the term took on the additional meaning of firm belief and confidence, particularly in regard to moral or religious precepts or doctrines. Faith, in this usage, became the term indicating a lively and firm belief in and assurance of the truth of presented facts, doctrines, dogmas and propositions, particularly in absence of immediate and personal knowledge of their truth. In this sense, the term indicated a certain surrendering of the rational demand for immediate and certain intellectual conviction, in favor of the claims of real or assumed authority. Thus, the faithful believer expressed and manifested a faith concerning certain dogmas and authoritative teaching of which he had, and could have, no immediate knowledge, and which in many cases seemed to be beyond his understanding, and even contrary to his actual experience. Thus, faith became the expression of a belief based upon confidence in and reliance upon authority rather than upon logical reasoning or actual knowledge. Later, from the combination of the two older concepts, there arose a new concept, a new meaning, involved in the old term, faith. Faith, in this new meaning, consisted of 1. Confidence, 2. Earnest belief or conviction of truth, and 3. Hope, or expectation of the realization of the object of faith. In this meaning, faith may be defined as earnest belief in the power of certain causes to produce certain effects, an abiding confidence that such effects will be so caused, and a confident expectation of the happening of such caused effects. Here, you will see, there is a mingling of the original concepts of faith and hope, respectively. Hope, alone, indicates a desire for some good, accompanied by at least some expectation, confidence or trust that it is obtainable or will be obtained. But faith, in the later meaning, took over this concept of hope, and added to it the firm and earnest belief, trust, confidence and expectation, of the fulfillment of the hope. Moreover, it indicated that not only the good which was the object of hope may be confidently expected, but that, likewise, bad thing may be the subject of the confident expectation. In this way, the bad thing feared, as well as the good thing desired, might become the object of the confident expectation and belief, the object of faith, in fact. Analyzing this last conception and meaning of faith, seeking to eliminate the non-essential factors and elements, and to preserve all the essential ones, we find that at the last we have left merely the concept of confident expectation and expectant belief. Think over the above-mentioned concept for a few moments, and you will see that faith, in this usage, is identical with confident expectation. The term confident means having full confidence, belief, and expectation, sure, certain, positive. The term expectation means state of expecting, or looking forward to, something that is believed about to happen or occur, or to come about, the act or state of awaiting confidently some approaching event. Here, you see, there is the idea of 1. A firm belief, accompanied by 2. The firm conviction of the realization. It is a combination of faith and hope raised to their highest degree of certainty. In the several books of this series, the general subject matter of which is the recognition, realization, and manifestation of personal power, frequent reference is made to the master formula of attainment, which consists of the following elements. 1. Definite ideals, or the mental attitude of knowing exactly what you want, of creating and maintaining strong, clear, definite ideas, ideals and purposes. 2. Insistent desire, or the mental attitude of wanting it hard enough, the strong, authoritative element of desire manifesting itself. 3. Confident expectation, or the mental attitude of undoubting faith, unfailing hope, in the success of your efforts, and the realization of your ideals and desires. 4. Persistent determination, or the mental attitude of indomitable will, persisting in its determination that you shall succeed in the attainment and realization of your ideals and desires. And 5. Balanced compensation, or the mental attitude of willingness to pay the price of attainment. In other volumes of this series we have considered in detail the respective elements of ideative power, desire power, will power, compensative power. In the present volume we shall direct your attention to that additional element of personal power, the power of confident expectation, which is properly termed faith power. Though perhaps not so familiar to the general reader as are the other 4 elements mentioned, this element of faith plays a part equal to that of any of them, mighty as their power undoubtedly is. He who leaves out of the calculation this element of faith, is discarding or neglecting to use one of the 5 great instruments of personal power, each of which is equal in importance to the other. Such a one is robbing himself of 1/5 of his available power, and that missing part may bring to him defeat in place of victory. We shall not attempt to decide, or to explain, just why faith, or confident expectation, should play such an important part in the activities of personal power. Such an attempt would take us to the very heart or center of power, the universal principle of power, itself, and even there it might be difficult to find that which we seek. Enough for the present purpose is for us to state that extended and careful investigation establishes the truth of this contention concerning faith power, and to point out to you the evidences of its presence and strength. The just why phase of the subject is quite difficult, but the just how phase is easily stated and explained. Faith power meets the test of pragmatism. It works, and produces results when properly applied. By reason of your familiarity with the idea, you will readily admit that the man in whom has been kindled the fierce flame of desire, will brush aside obstacles, and surmount obstructions in his path, and if you have learned the inside facts, you will also realize how such a man will attract to himself that which fits in with his insistent desire. In the same way, you will readily admit that the man of the persistent will cut and bore through the obstructing rock of circumstances, and reach his goal, circumstances themselves seeming to fall in with the purpose of such a will. But when it comes to ascribing similar virtues and power to faith, to admitting that faith power is equal in force and efficacy to either desire power or will power, your unfamiliarity with this phase of the subject may cause you to withhold your judgment and assent. Yet, as you will presently discover, faith power is as strong, efficacious and powerful as is desire power, or as is will power. We insist upon this fact, not for any academic reasons, but simply and solely because we wish you to realize this important truth to the end that you may set it to work for you in your own manifestations of personal power. We have referred above to the several elements of the master formula of attainment. Let us now examine in further detail these elements, leaving the third element, that of confident expectation, for the last. 1. Definite ideals. One must know as certainly, as positively, as dearly, and as definitely as possible, exactly what he wants. The man who lacks this clearness of direction cannot be expected to walk straight toward the object of his desires. Many men, otherwise well-equipped mentally, fail to obtain or to attain success, simply because they do not know exactly what they want. Lacking a specific and definite goal, they wander along bypaths and side roads, traveling often in a circle. The definite aim is necessary if the straight road to attainment is to be traveled. The better one knows exactly what he wants, the more clearly he is able to visualize and picture it in his mind, the straighter and more direct will be his path to it, and the less will be his danger of becoming confused and bewildered, and of becoming sidetracked. This proposition is axiomatic, self-evident. 2. Insistent desire. One must insistently desire that which he wants, must want it hard enough, in order that his full powers of application and endeavor may be awakened, aroused and called into action. The men who, as the Americans say, get there, or, as the French say, who arrive, are not those of faint wishes or wants, of feeble desires and cravings, but rather those who are filled with the ardent urge of desire and longing, with the fierce lust of wanting that which they want, when they want it. The world is filled with pink tea wishers, and their names comprise a large portion of the list of the failures. The small list of the really successful individuals is filled with the names of those who wanted it hard enough. In order to attain a thing, you must want it the worst way, as the saying goes, you must want it so hard that it hurts. Otherwise, your energies and powers of will are not called forth. This, also, is axiomatic, self-evident. 4. Persistent determination. One must persistently will, determinately resolve, and firmly apply one's full powers of will to the attainment of that which one knows that he wants, and which he wants hard enough to cause him to pay the price of attainment. This final stage of mental power must be present and applied, else the whole enterprise fails. This element, perhaps, is the one most strongly emphasized in the popular opinion and thought on the subject, so strongly, in fact, that the other elements are often underemphasized. The need of the strong will is universally recognized, and the handicap of the weak will is universally admitted. One must will to will, if he would attain success. This, also, is axiomatic, self-evident. 5. Balanced compensation. One must obey the law of compensation, the rule of balance, manifest in all nature. He must be prepared to pay the price of attainment in the form of a. Diligent work, b. Service to others, and c. Relinquishment of desires, aims, and performances opposed to the subject or object of his definite ideals, insistent desires, and persistent determination. This also is axiomatic, self-evident. Now, let us return to the consideration of the third element, i.e., that of confident expectation. 6. Confident expectation. One must confidently expect to realize that which he knows definitely that he wants, which he earnestly and insistently desires, which he persistently and determinately wills to attain, and for which he is willing to pay the price. In the measure that he does this, he also opens the draught of his mental furnace in which burns the flame of desire, and as a consequence, he generates a greater supply of the steam of will. Doubt is the shutting off of the draughts of the furnace, which results in the deadening of the fire of desire, and the decreasing of the supply of available steam of will. Faith is the stimulation of desire and will, doubt, their deadener, and unfaith, the destroyer of both. Let us, however, drop all figures of speech and proceed to consider concrete examples. In your own experience you have known the power and energy of the desire and will which have come to you by the introduction of the element of faith into the mental equation. When you have become tired and wearied, so much so that your desires have burned low and your volition has become less intense, you have discovered something which re-aroused your faith in the outcome, your hope in the attainment, your confident expectation, in short, and lo! Your desires once more asserted their power, and your will again sprang back to the task. On the other hand, when you have been going along nicely, and have seemed to be succeeding, a series of depressing circumstances, the appearance of unfavorable conditions, have caused faith to droop and doubt, distrust, and even unfaith to manifest itself. When this has occurred, you have found that you lost heart, and to lose heart means that your desire loses its insistent urge, and your will loses its persistent application and determination. Again, you have been pursuing some plan, have been building upon some idea in which you had faith, have been selling goods in which you believed, and have been doing well in that direction. Then, alas! Doubt and distrust have crept in, you lost your faith in the idea, you lost confidence in the goods handled by you, and, as a consequence, the bottom dropped out of the thing, and you found your desire weakening and your will losing its power of application and its determination. Most of us do our best when we believe in the thing which we are doing, and but few of us can do creditable work if we don't believe in it. Thus, faith is found to exert a tremendous influence over desire and will, in either direction. Faith can truly say, "They reckon ill, who leave me out." We feel that we are justified in asking you to regard as axiomatic, self-evident, these statements concerning faith, or confident expectation, just as truly as you so regard the similar statements made concerning thought, desire and will, respectively. We feel that we are warranted in asking you to admit to an equal place of importance with thought, desire and will this element or factor of personal power known as faith, or confident expectation, even though you have not previously recognized its importance and power. Moreover, we feel that we need not apologize to you when we ask you to analyze your own mental and emotional makeup for the purpose of discovering whether you have not, heretofore, omitted this important element from your characteristic mental attitude, or, at least, whether you will not do well to take it into greater account in the future. Before proceeding to the elaboration of this idea of faith or confident expectation, however, we wish to call your attention to a fact of even as great importance as those just presented to you. We allude now to the positive effect of faith, or confident expectation, wrongly applied. You have seen and undoubtedly now realize, that doubt, distrust, and unfaith exert a strong negative influence in the direction of deadening the fire of desire, and restricting the steam of will, but you have probably failed to realize that this doubt, distrust, and unfaith may become transmuted into an active faith and confident expectation in the wrong direction, and may thus become an active power working to produce failure, non-success, and defeat. Faith may, and does, cause mine own to come to me, but, reversed in its direction, it may, and does, often cause the condition of, that which I have feared hath come upon me. Analyzing faith as you have done, and finding that its essence is confident expectation, viz., the belief and expectation of the happening or coming about of things, you will readily perceive that if that confident expectation is directed to something bad rather than good, something feared instead of desired, it may work with equal effect though in the wrong direction. Confident expectation of evil, the fear of dreaded results, is as truly faith as is the confident expectation and hope of good and desired things, though very few persons even begin to realize this fact, this very important fact of life and action. This realization brings to mind many corroborative facts, facts serving to support it, which go far toward explaining many things in your personal experiences which have heretofore perplexed you greatly, and which have been laid aside by you as beyond explanation. Leaving aside for later consideration in this book the psychological, or even spiritual, causes which operate to produce the above state of affairs, we wish here to call your attention to certain general facts concerned with the operation of this law and mental action. You are more or less aware of the law of attraction in the mental world by means of the operation of which ideas, things, men, conditions and environment are correlated to your habitual thoughts and general mental attitude, and by means of which such things are attracted to and drawn toward you, or you toward them. This is no longer deemed to be moonshine, an idle fancy. Too many practical men have discovered its truth, and applied its principles successfully, to allow of this old accusation. Despite the sometimes fanciful theories employed to interpret and explain this class of facts, the facts themselves are most real and far from fanciful. Well, then, we wish to remind you here, or perhaps to inform you for the first time, that this is a rule that works two ways, in either direction. Faith, i.e., confident expectation, if directed toward evil and feared things, operates with as much force as if directed toward good and desired things. It serves to fill the mind with visualized pictures of the undesirable things, in place of those desired. It arouses the negative aspect of desire, which is aversion, and which has a force of its own, sometimes operating in the wrong direction. It arouses the negative aspect of hope, which is fear, which has a strong attracting power in the wrong direction. In short, it reverses the entire mental and spiritual machinery of the individual, and causes his forces to travel in the wrong direction, in the same way and with the same power with which they travel in the right direction when energized by faith and confident expectation of the right kind. Negative faith, i.e., doubt, distrust, and unfaith, sometimes transmutes itself into positive faith, but faith in the wrong set of things, in the wrong direction. So, you see, it is of the utmost importance to you that you should learn the laws of faith power, and to acquire the art of running its machinery properly, in the right direction, and to avoid the reversed process above indicated. There is much more to this subject of faith power than you have imagined. The psychology of faith. The general conception of faith, the idea of faith held by most persons, is that it is an emotional state independent of, if not indeed actually contrary to reason. This idea arises by reason of the tendency to view faith only from one particular angle. If faith were subjected to an all-around view, the observer changing his position and shifting his viewpoint in his observation, it would be seen that while faith often seems to transcend reason and to be independent of its reports, yet it is not contrary to or opposed to reason, and, in fact, depends largely upon reason for its direction and application. Faith, in its essence and fundamental substance, may be said to be beyond reason, to transcend reason. Yet, without the employment of reason and experience, faith degenerates into mere blind credulity. While not dependent upon reason for its basic foundation, and while not having reason as its fount and spring, yet faith must needs employ reason as its useful instrument of manifestation and expression, and must use the signposts of reason as guides pointing out the road over which it travels. It is equally true that reason must be based upon faith, for, of itself it has no ultimate foundation. Reason and faith are not antagonistic, when they are rightly understood, rather are they brothers in arms, each helpful and useful to the other. The ideal is the well-balanced coordination and correlation of reason and faith. Intellect, of which reason is a manifestation and form of expression, is an instrument evolved by life, or spirit, call it what you will, for special purposes. In its own field it is supreme. But its own field is a limited one, though this fact is not generally recognized. There are other fields of mentation in the vast domain of life or spirit. When intellect is pushed beyond its limits it becomes dazed and confused, and seems to lose its normal powers. As Bergson has strikingly pointed out to us, there are things which reason, of itself, can never know, yet which, when discovered by intuition, require the use of reason to manifest efficiently. Likewise, though intuition knows these things by reason of its essential nature, very often the knowledge is not raised into consciousness until reason demands to be furnished with it. When reason recognizes this fact, and is willing to call upon intuition for these reports, and to apply them when thus revealed, then, and then only, does reason rise to its greatest heights of attainment. So, in the same way, only when intuition recognizes reason as its most effective instrument of manifestation does intuition proceed properly and efficiently along the road of practical accomplishment. The intellectual pride which seeks to banish intuition from the field of thought, and which strives to make reason the sole occupant of that realm, is as one-sided and as illogical as is that anti-intellectual tendency which would exalt intuition and faith to the position of absolute rulers of the domain of thought, denying to reason any right of entrance to it. These are twin errors, each one insisting upon gazing at but one particular side of the shield while refusing to walk around it so as to perceive its reverse side. The truth of the matter as indicated in the above statements is not generally recognized. There are many, of course, who see that faith is more or less inefficient unless reason is called in to aid and direct its expression and manifestation. The examples of the effect of blind credulity and unreasoning faith are numerous, and are readily recalled as illustrations of the need for reason in the manifestation of faith. The intellectualists seem to have the matter all their own way, at first sight, but a little closer examination will reveal the other side of the question, the twin truth. For when we demand to be shown the roots, bases, and foundations of reason, we are reluctantly pointed to what? Faith. All deductive reasoning is based upon a premise or proposition. The major premise is the sacred truth upon which the deduction is made. There is always the tacit assumption that the truth of the major premise is axiomatic, i.e., self-evident and not requiring proof, argument, or demonstration. If this be admitted, the subsequent reasoning is mechanical, and almost mathematical in its certainty. But when one claims that the person asserting the premise or proposition is begging the question, i.e., assuming without warrant, the truth of the premise, or tacitly implying that it is accepted or not disputed, when the objecting one states, "I dispute your major premise," then the trouble begins. The burden of proof, in logic, rests upon the person advancing the premise or proposition, and he then may be called upon to prove the truth of his premise or proposition. When such person attempts to furnish such proof, and to support it by logical argument, he simply shifts his position a step or two backward. When that step is reached, he halts, and recommences his argument. How? By advancing another premise or proposition, usually another major premise which he assumes to be axiomatic, or self-evident. If this be objected to, he must again retreat and erect another line of entrenchments, and so on, and so on. If his opponent be sufficiently persistent and determined, this retreat is continued indefinitely, unless the first man disgustedly discontinues the argument, and refuses to play, this, of course, being his right, and in no way being a confession of defeat or in any way a victory for the skeptical opponent. The discussion simply is off in such case. All this brings us to the point where we perceive that sooner or later we reach a stage in reasoning in which there is something taken for granted, something assumed for the purposes of the argument, something which has not as yet been proved, but which is to be employed as the basis of the proof of something else, in short, something which is based on faith, expressed or implied. That basis of faith, however, need not be blind faith, or unreasoning credulity. It should, indeed, not be so. It may be, and usually is, something which seems reasonable and not inconsistent with reason, but, nevertheless, it is accepted by an act of faith, as logic defines that term, for it is not positively known, nor has it been proved logically. There is no escape from this conclusion, disagreeable as it may be to the extreme intellectualists. The better the logician, the more freely will he confess to this fact of logic. It is usually only the amateurs who seek to dispute it. Leaving the field of formal logic, and entering that of the practical logic of everyday thought and life, we find the same state of affairs existing. The most important reasoning of practical everyday life is based upon faith. We do not know positively that the sun will rise tomorrow morning. All that we know is that in the history of the race the sun always has risen in the morning, and we believe that it will continue the practice on the morrow, but we do not know absolutely that such will be the case. We cannot prove it absolutely by argument, even by mathematics, unless we admit the existence of universal law, or the law of causation, whereby the same causes, under the same conditions, will produce the same effects. You may object to all this as silly, but, instead, it is the strictest application of the rules and laws of logical thought. Of course, you say that we know that the sun will rise tomorrow morning, and may even tell to a second the time of its rising. Certainly we know this, but we know it only by an act of faith. That faith, moreover, is the belief that there exists universal law, that natural things act and move under law, that the same causes, under the same conditions, produce the same results. That law, and every other natural law, is to us merely an hypothesis, well established by experience, observation, and experiment. It is true, but still an hypothesis, a guess, an assumption based upon faith. The conviction of knowing is really intuitive, it is an act of faith. The faith, it is true, is directed by reason, but in its essence it still is faith. Science, that supposedly cold intellectual school of thought, has its foundations in faith, though it is usually thought to turn its back upon faith, and to stand upon the solid rock of reason and intellect. Its laws, at the last, are merely the way things work, which means the way that observed things have been found to work in the past, the habit of procedure observed by nature. The law of causation is a tremendous statement of faith. The laws of chemistry, the laws of physics, these are statements of faith. The molecules and atoms of matter have never been perceived by the senses, they are unknown so far as sense knowledge is concerned. Things act as if molecules and atoms exist, so we assume that they do exist, we take them on faith. The keenest minds in science admit this, they frankly state that, of the ultimate nature of things we know absolutely nothing. Science adopts hypotheses by acts of faith, when subsequent investigations shake the faith in them, they are discarded in favor of others likewise based on faith. Faith blended and harmonized with reason, but not blind faith or unreasoning credulity, is the faith of science. The combined hypotheses of science, raised to the dignity of principles and laws, in many cases, constitute the creed of science, i.e., that which begins with the statement, I believe in, etc. This creed, like all others, is a confession of faith, faith directed and regulated by reason, it is true, but still faith. Philosophy, like science, is based on faith, faith rationally interpreted, but still faith. Philosophy holds as axiomatic, self-evident, the contrary of which is unthinkable, the basic proposition that, from nothing, no thing can arise, flow or proceed, and its corollary, had there ever been a time in which nothing was, and no thing was in existence, then no thing would be in existence now. But it does not positively know that such is the fact, it cannot prove that something cannot arise from nothingness. All that it knows is that it cannot think such a thing to be possible, and that it has had no experience with anything of that sort. You may say that it knows this truth intuitively, and so it does, as a fact, just as it knows many other things intuitively, but that which is the report of intuition is a report arising from fields of mentation outside those of reason, though the reports are not necessarily conflicting with or opposed to each other. All intuitive knowledge is belief based upon faith, at the last. Geometry is an exact science, yet it is based solely upon certain laws and principles which are accepted by faith, for they cannot be proved absolutely by reason. The laws of geometry are articles of the creed, of the confession of faith, of geometry. Geometry begins with a series of I believes, these are called axioms, self-evident facts requiring no proof, and assumed to be truth. Yet these are all I believes, not I knows, for they cannot be proved as universal truths. They act as if they were universal truths, everything tested by them indicate their correctness, yet until each and everything in the universe is so tested, until infinite space is measured, there can be no positive proof that they are universal laws and truths. In fact, there are certain schools of transcendental geometry which have found quite different, and often quite contradictory laws which act as if they were true. This does not mean that there is no truth in such laws and the conceptions based upon them, we would be insane to ignore them in our practical life. Moreover, this does not mean that men do not know these things to be true, they do know them to be true so far as they may be conceived, but that knowing is intuitive, not purely intellectual. Intellect discovers them through its reasoning processes, and intuition reports the conviction of their truth. They represent acts of faith, faith rationally interpreted. This may be a hard saying to many of us, but it is one made by the keenest minds of the race. The most certain laws of physics, chemistry, and geometry are, in the end, based upon faith, rationally interpreted. Such faith is justifiable, that is freely admitted and approved of, but we insist that faith must be accorded its proper place in the consideration, and not merely bidden to stand in the anteroom of thought while intellect is made the honored guest, the lion, in the reception room. In the ordinary affairs of life and action you act according to faith. You do this so naturally and instinctively, so constantly and habitually, that you are not aware of it. You start on a railroad journey. You buy your ticket, having faith that the train will start from the station named on the timetable, and approximately on the time noted in it. You have faith that it will proceed to the destination promised. You do not know these things from actual experience, for you cannot so know what lies in the future. You take them for granted, you assume them to be true, you act upon faith. You take your seat. You do not know the engineer or the conductor, you have never seen them, nor do you even know their names. You do not know whether or not they are competent, reliable, or experienced. All that you know is that it is reasonable to suppose that the railroad company will select the right kind of men for the task. You act upon faith rationally interpreted. You have faith in the company, in the management, in the system of conducting the matter, in the equipment, etc., and you stake your life and wholeness of body upon that faith. You may say that you only take a chance in the matter, but, even so, you manifest faith in that chance, or else you wouldn't take it. You wouldn't take a chance of standing in the path of a rushing express train, or of leaping from the Eiffel Tower, would you? You manifest faith in something, even if that something be no more than the law of averages. You place your money in a bank, here again you manifest faith rationally interpreted. You sell goods on credit to your customers, faith again. You have faith in your grocer, your butcher, your lawyer, your physician, your clerks, your insurance company. That is to say, faith of some kind, or of some degree, else you would not trust anything whatsoever to them. If you believe that a man is dishonest, incompetent, or insane, you do not place confidence in him, nor trust your affairs or interests to him. Your faith is in his wrongness, and not in his rightness, but it is faith, nevertheless. Every belief short of actual, positive knowledge, is a form or phase of faith. You may say that these things denote, not faith, but rather confidence or expectation of some degree. This is merely changing the terms but not the meaning. In the preceding section of this book we have shown you that the very essence and substance of the present usage and meaning of the term and concept, faith, is confident expectation. The expectation may not be very pronounced, the confidence may be limited, but, nevertheless, it is confident expectation of some kind, form, phase, or degree. Even the belief that some undesirable and feared thing may happen is the negative phase of faith. Fear is a form or phase of faith mingled with the negation of hope. Fear and hope are both forms or phases of expectation. When raised to the degree of confident expectation they are markedly forms of faith. You have the faith that if you step off a high building into space, you will fall and be injured, perhaps killed. This is your faith in the law of gravitation. You have a similar faith in certain other physical laws. You have the confident expectation that evil results to you will follow certain courses of action concerning these physical laws. You have faith that poisons will injure or destroy your physical body, and you avoid such. You may object that you know these things, not merely believe them, but you don't know anything directly and immediately until you experience it, and you cannot experience a future happening before its time. All that you can do concerning each and every future experience is to believe certain things concerning it, and that belief is nothing else but faith, interpreted more or less rationally and correctly. You do not know certainly and positively, by direct experience, or by pure reason, a single thing about the happenings of tomorrow, or of some day next week, or of the corresponding day of next year. Yet you act as if you did possess such knowledge, but why? Simply because of your faith in the law and order of the universe, of the operation of the law of causation, whereby effects follow causes, of the law of probabilities, or the law of average, or of some other natural law. But your knowledge of and belief in such laws are but forms of your faith, i.e., confident expectation that things will work out according to the rule observed in past actions. You cannot get away from faith in your thoughts and beliefs concerning the present and the future, any more than you can run away from your shadow in the bright daylight. Without faith rationally interpreted, without confident expectation in at least some degree, there could be no rational action or procedure. All human intercourse and communication, all human coordination and correlation between individuals, all dealings between man and man, all enterprises designed and carried on by man, and all the plans and purposes of the race of men, all these, each and every one of them, are based on some form of faith more or less rationally interpreted. We know certainly only the events of the present moment, or of the past, the events and happenings of the future, even of one moment hence, we know only by and through faith more or less directed and guided by reason. We live by faith, we act through faith. From the foregoing, and the reflections aroused in your mind by the consideration of it, you will perceive that faith has as true and as sound position and place in the psychology of the human being as have reason and intellect. Faith is not an alien intruder, it is a native of the mental realm which it inhabits, and its claims to citizenship are quite well founded. In its place, and within its normal limits, its work is as useful as is that of intellect or reason. Outside of that place, and beyond those limits, however, its work is as ineffective, or even as harmful, as is that of intellect which so transcends its normal field of activity. The mind may be debauched by arrogant intellect, as well as outraged by unreasoning faith. It is only in the well-balanced, thoroughly harmonized, combination of faith and reason, intellect and intuition that the human mind manifests its highest efficiency and performs its best work. Intellect and reason are comparatively late comers to the mind, in the history of mental evolution. Instinct, which is a phase of, or reflection of intuition, was there long before reason. Faith, by reason of its relation to intuition, is more deeply rooted in the mental soil than is reason, hence its wonderful power, manifested often in the very face of reason. By reason of this relation to the most elementary and essential, fundamental and basic facts of mental substance and process, faith has a motive power and an attractive power closely resembling that of desire and will. Indeed, there are many thinkers along the lines of esoteric philosophy who indicate that the element of faith, or confident expectation, plays a much more important part in the activities and accomplishments of desire and will than is apparent to those who view only the exoteric phase of the subject. As we proceed with this consideration of faith power, in the present instruction, you will perceive many instances of this elemental power of faith, and of the results arising from it. Faith not only blazes the trail which is followed by us in subsequent travels of will, it also digs the channels through which flow to us the currents of things, events, happenings and persons from the outside world. Well did the ancient sages accord to faith an equal position in the mental trinity with desire and will, respectively. Insistent desire, confident expectation, and persistent determination, desire, faith, and will, truly a trinity of personal power. Without the confident expectation, there will be no kindling of the flame of insistent desire, no application of the steel of persistent determination. Unless faith expresses itself in the confident expectation of the obtaining or attainment of the thing desired and willed, then will desire find it difficult to want it hard enough, and will find it impossible to persistently determine to obtain it. Desire and will depend upon faith for their inspirational forces. By means of the latter, the energizing forces of desire and the dynamic forces of will are inspired and vitalized, and have the breath of life breathed into them. Expectant attention. Psychologists have noted the effect of, and realized the important part played by that mental state known as expectant attention. Expectant attention is that concentrated direction of attention toward some action, event or happening which the individual expects to occur, i.e., to which he looks forward, with more or less confidence and belief, as likely to occur or to come to pass. This mental attitude, you will note, is a form or phase of faith or confident expectation such as we have considered in the foregoing sections of this book. It is an axiom of psychology that the laws of attention operate so as to cause the individual to perceive far more clearly the objects or facts toward which his attention is specially directed, and to perceive far less clearly those objects or facts which are outside of the field of his special attention. In fact, attention always proceeds by manifesting a selective action. In such selective action it more or less unconsciously, or, rather, subconsciously, brings and holds in the field of consciousness those objects which have attracted its notice, and shuts out of that field those objects which have not so attracted the same. Out of the multiplicity of sights and sounds which knock at the door of consciousness at almost every moment of your life, you select those which fit in with the general subject, idea, or line of thought to which your attention is directed, and at the same time reject the consideration and perception of those not so fitting in with such. If you are especially interested in violin music, you will hear clearly the notes of the violins, while the remainder of the instruments manifesting sound in the performance of a large orchestra are relegated to the fringe of consciousness, and are perceived only as a general background. Another person would ignore the violins and would hear only the notes of his favorite instruments. In the same way, at a theatrical performance where a number of persons are on the stage at the same time, you are apt to see the actions and to hear the words of your favorite actor, while those of the others are far less distinct in your consciousness. Likewise, you read from the pages of a book only that which is associated with your previous ideas concerning its subject, hence the old saying, we get from a book only what we give to it. The professional magician understands and employs these laws of attention. He manages to direct your attention to one of his hands, and to hold it there, while his other hand performs the baldest and boldest kind of deception upon you without detection. Or, he manages to direct your attention to some other part of the stage, while under your very eyes, though unobserved by you, he makes certain changes which are necessary for the successful performance of his feat. Pickpockets and swindlers take advantage of this same state of affairs. They cause us to direct our attention to some other thing or place, while we leave unguarded the receptacle containing our possessions. We are all keenly awake to that to which our interested attention is directed, while we are all more or less asleep concerning the things from which such attention is diverted. This rule applies not only to your perception of objects through the senses, but also to your thoughts concerning any subject. You may imagine that you are exercising your reasoning powers judiciously, impartially, and without bias, but in most cases you are considering only the facts, data, and arguments which are in accord with your preconceived notions, beliefs, and prejudices in the matter. You tend to see only that one particular side of the question, that one set of facts, that one line of argument, the opposite aspect or phase being practically ignored by you. Or, even if you are particularly careful not to fall into this error, you at least tend to overemphasize the favorite set of facts or arguments, and to underemphasize the other and opposed group. Moreover, once having made up your mind concerning a subject, you fall into the habit of unconsciously or subconsciously selecting from your world of experience those facts and data which serve to corroborate your own belief, and those which serve to controvert the opposite belief. You find on all sides facts, data, and arguments sustaining your position, and overturning the opposite contention. You tend to become blind to undesired and unwelcome facts, data, and arguments, though you may not realize this unless you are especially watchful over your mental processes. From the same experience, however, you would gather a similar array of desired evidence on the other side were you committed to the views of that side of the case. When we say, you, we mean, all of us, as well. Our subconscious minds are strong partisans. They eagerly search for and select the desired objects of thought, and determinately shut the door to the opposite class of objects. The axiom of psychology, attention follows interest, is exemplified by common experience. We tend to perceive that in which we are especially interested, and to ignore that which is uninteresting. The man interested in trees perceives a world of facts while walking through a park, which facts are totally unperceived by the average man. The man interested in stone arrowheads finds them in walking through a field, though others pass them by unobserved. As John Burroughs has told us, the man with the walking fern in mind finds walking fern in every bit of woods, while the rest of us are not aware of its presence there. In short, all of us tend to perceive in the outside world that which corresponds with what already exists in our inner mental world. You, yourself, have often experienced the operation of this law of the mind when once you have become interested in some new subject, idea or set of facts. While up to that time you have never observed any special facts or data connected with that which has become your object of interest, now you will have come to the conclusion that the whole world is apparently becoming aroused to an interest in that particular subject, just as you have been. You will feel this to be so because now every newspaper, magazine or book which you pick up seems to contain special references to that subject and items of interest concerning it. Likewise, you will hear the subject discussed in the trains and streetcars, in the clubs, and wherever a number of persons meet and enter into conversation. On every hand you find something which fits into this subject of your new interest. But the fact is that the change is not in the outside world, it is in yourself. That which is within your mind is seeking for, and finding, that in the outside world which agrees and harmonizes with itself. Another person not so interested, or even you, yourself, were you not so interested, would be almost, if not indeed totally unaware of these same interests on the part of others, even in the same places, conditions and surroundings. A new object of interest on your part acts like a pair of colored spectacles. You see the outside world of things and happenings tinted in harmony with your glasses. Technically stated, your attention follows your interest, and in so doing it manifests its characteristic selective power. The application of the mental laws just called to your attention is quite important in view of their practical effects upon your everyday life. By reason of these laws, the degree of your success in any particular line of work depends materially upon the degree of interest which is aroused in you concerning such work. If your interest is keen, then you will perceive and discover on all sides, in every day of your life, certain facts, data and other things which will serve the purposes of that work. You will find yourself dwelling in a world surrounded by such facts. If, on the contrary, you manifest little or no interest in your work, but perform the same almost mechanically, then this world of helpful things, ideas and facts will not exist for you, you will dwell in another world. There will be nothing in you to call out of the outer world that which is in harmony with itself. The above-mentioned psychological laws, and their effects may be stated briefly as follows. 1. You perceive only that toward which your attention is attracted and directed, and only in the degree to which that attention is so called forth. 2. Attention follows interest, and is called forth by it only in a direct ratio to the degree of that interest. Therefore you perceive only that in which you are to some degree interested, and only according to the measure of the degree of interest manifested. 3. Your world of perceptive experience is created by your interested attention, by reason of the fact that such interested attention selects from the outside world such facts as are in agreement with its inner states, and rejects those facts which are opposed to such. 4. The same state of affairs is manifested in your mental world of memory, recollection, and selection of ideas. You select and perceive those which accord with your interest, and reject the opposite class. Now, the above brings us back to our consideration of the subject of expectant attention, which, as we have said, is a phase of faith or confident expectation. Expectant attention is a very potent and active form of interested attention. In it you not only are interested in an object, subject or state of affairs, but, in addition, you believe in certain conditions or facts, and expect that certain results will occur by reason of their presence. You not only have your attention directed toward the thing by reason of your interest in it, and see that which is in accordance with this, but you also expect, i.e., confidently believe, that certain events will happen or come to pass concerning those things, or proceeding from them. The cat watching at a mouse hole, or the dog digging out a woodchuck, manifests the keenest and most active kind of attention imaginable. This, not only because the animal is intensely interested in the object of obtaining his prey, but also because he hopes to capture it, expects to secure it, because he believes that he will get it in the end. If the animal did not so keenly believe and expect the successful result, his interest and attention would lack that intensity which is now present, and his energies would not be so actively called forth and manifested. This rule is equally true of human endeavor. When you believe in the probability of a successful outcome of an undertaking, you experience the keenest interest in the work leading to it. Your work is in direct relation to that expectation. If, on the contrary, you entertain grave doubts of the efficacy of your efforts and work, your energies will slacken, your interest will abate, and your attention will relax, and, as a consequence, your work will become less effective. Again, if you not only doubt and question the successful outcome, but also go so far as to actually believe that the effort will result in failure, then your interest will become dead, your attention weak, and your work of the poorest and most ineffective quality. More than this, if your belief and expectant attention be that of the certainty of failure, then you will actually find yourself unconsciously working with that idea in mind, and toward that end, you will be deliberately, though subconsciously, riding to a fall. What has been said above concerning the effect of interest, attention and expectancy, upon the conscious activities of your mind, is trebly true concerning your subconscious activities. The subconscious mind is peculiarly liable to be affected by beliefs of the kind noted, to suggestions, in accordance with these coming from your conscious mentality. It accepts as true your beliefs and convictions, your confident expectations, your earnest hopes concerning the probable result of courses of action or existing causes, and it proceeds to manifest its powers in the direction so pointed out to it. Accordingly, it blinds the attention to facts, ideas, and conditions running contrary to your beliefs and expectations, and it renders keen your powers of perception of those facts, ideas, and conditions which agree with your beliefs and expectations. The subconscious mentality is very active. It works even while you sleep, and while you are thinking of other things, and, though in the first place it is influenced greatly by your conscious thoughts and beliefs, it eventually acquires control over the latter to a marked degree. Inasmuch as over 75% of your mental operations are performed on the subconscious planes of mentation, you will see that this subconscious mentality is capable of influencing your mental attitude, and your mental direction of effort, to a very considerable extent. Accordingly, you will realize how important it is to have your beliefs and expectant attention under control, and to have them working in the right direction. Let us give you a few illustrations of the above stated principle, drawn from the experiences of everyday life, experiences on the physical plane, but in which the subconscious mental influence is manifest. These illustrations may be deemed trivial by those who fail to perceive that the principle operating in them is also involved in far more important happenings and action. We ask you to accept these as simple illustrations of a far from simple general class of phenomena. Several years ago, one of the writers of this book knew a young man who was an expert bowler. He was a very careful player, with mind and muscles well under control, with great powers of concentration on his play, and with nerves not easily rattled. When questioned carefully by the writer concerning the mental operations leading to his careful play, he gave some very interesting and instructive answers. Among other things, he said that he attributed his successful play largely to his gradually acquired habit of arousing a mental state of certainty, assurance, and confident expectation that his aim would be perfect. He said that sometimes it was rather difficult to arouse that feeling, as he expressed it, it is sometimes slow a coming, but that he would wait a few moments until it came. This coming, as he called it, was manifested by a certain sort of click in my mind, which was the signal to send the ball forward. When that click came, he just knew for certain that his aim was perfect. The confident expectation, or expectant attention, served so to coordinate his mental calculation and his muscular effort that success was assured. He told the writer that early in his bowling experience he was subject to being rattled by the remarks and chaffing of opposing players, and, so, often failed to make a strike which ordinarily was quite easy. He said that he managed to overcome this difficulty by cultivating the power of shutting out from his consciousness the remarks of others. He added, however, that even quite late in his experience he lost a game by reason of having accepted the adverse suggestion of a bystander. As nearly as the writer can recollect the conversation, he used the following words in describing this occurrence. I was at a close stage of the game, and I could win only by putting the ball between the 1 and 2 pins, which ought to have been easy for me to do, judging from my past record. Just as I was about to bowl, a friend of my opponent said, quietly, as if to his friend, just watch him hit the 4 pin. Somehow, or someway, there crept into my mind the idea that I was going to hit the 4 pin, which was about the worst thing I could do just then. I can't say that I was exactly afraid, but I got the notion that I was going to hit that 4 pin in spite of myself. I actually believed and expected it. I aimed with my usual care, straight between the 1 and 2 pins, and then let the ball go. I never could tell how it happened, but my ball rolled right toward that 4 pin, and struck it fair and square. And so, instead of making a 10 strike, I got only a split. That fellow sure hoodooed me, all right. I never knew how he did it, but do it he did. Here was evidently a case of misdirected expectant attention, faith reversed. He believed and expected the bad shot, and, although he used his habitual care, his subconscious mind manifested his belief and unconsciously to him influenced his muscular action at the critical moment. His click of certainty in ordinary cases was the result of the same psychological principle. In either case, in each case, the subconscious mentality was striving to make true in outer action the inner belief. It was a case of thought taking form in action, of the response of the physical muscles to the subconscious mental state. We understand that baseball players report a similar state of affairs. They often just know the probable result of their batting, or of their catching of the ball in the field. They experience that certain state of expectant attention, which is a phase of confident expectation, and their muscles become a perfectly coordinated machine. Again, when a player allows himself to be rattled by the shouts from the benches, when he allows the adverse suggestions to obtain lodgment in his subconscious mind, then the faith is reversed, and that which he fears comes upon him. In either case there is manifested in action the mental picture formed in the mind of the player. The ideal tends to become real, expectant attention creates the ideal, and the subconscious mentality performs the action. The writer was once told by an ex-manager of noted pugilists that a similar condition is found to exist among prize fighters. He said, if a boy believes that he is going to be licked, then licked he is in advance of the match. If, on the contrary, he feels in his heart that he is the better man, then his chances of success are enormously increased. There's a whole lot of this mind stuff in ring fighting, believe me. The writer personally met with a similar case, occurring 20 years ago, in the days of bicycles and cable cars. He was riding on the grip car, on the front part of the bench of the open car then used. Hearing the grip man using strong language, he looked ahead, and there saw a young colored man riding a bicycle and trying to cross the street on an angle, just in front of the car. Ordinarily there would have been no difficulty in his making the crossing, there was plenty of room and plenty of time for it. But when the grip man swore at him, and called out, "Look out, there, you're going to run into the car," the young man's hand seemed to turn in spite of himself, and he, seemingly deliberately, turned his wheel and ran straight into the car. When picked out of the wreck of his bicycle, badly shaken up but uninjured, he was asked why he turned his wheel toward the car. He answered, I dunno, I expect dat will just got skeered and runned away with me." The real truth was that his expectant attention was active, and the wheel acted just as he looked for it to act, his subconscious mentality performing the action. Many old-time bicycle riders will understand and appreciate this illustration, they have been there themselves. The same principle may be seen in operation in the actions of children. Children are very apt to take on the suggestions of their elders, and to act upon them subconsciously even when they don't want to. We have witnessed the unfortunate result of the admonition, "Look out, Myrtle, you'll drop that vase, look out, it's slipping now." Of course, bang went the vase. Again, "Look out, Johnny, be careful, you'll slip off the banister." Johnny accepts the suggestion, his subconscious mentality believes it, and the action follows. We once saw a little boy walking along the top of a high brick wall. He made the trip backward and forward several times without trouble. But when, finally, a grown-up shouted a warning of danger, coupled with the assertion that the boy would fall off, the boy's expectant attention was aroused, and down he came. A leading tightrope performer has stated in a newspaper interview that if he entertains the thought that he will fall, he is almost certain to become wobbly, and then needs to exert considerable willpower to maintain his balance. The above recited illustrations of the effect of confident expectation, in its phase of expectant attention, in these little simple matters of everyday experience, are likewise illustrations of the operation of the same psychological principle, the principle of faith in its many forms, in many far more important, and far more complex, matters of life and action. As we proceed in our consideration of the subject in this instruction, you will perceive this same universal principle at work along many different lines, and in many different forms, phases and aspects of its power. For the present, we ask you merely to bear in mind this statement: the entire set of mental processes, conscious, subconscious, and unconscious, tend to proceed in the direction of expectant attention, or confident expectation, which is a phase of faith. The mind, consciously, subconsciously, or unconsciously, strives to build around itself a world corresponding to its beliefs, and to act along the lines of its beliefs, even when such a world or such actions are not desired. Hope and fear, when expressions of confident expectation, or expectant attention, are potent motive powers, particularly along subconscious lines of mentation. The secret of faith cures. Among the many phases and forms of the application and manifestation of the mental principle of faith power is that important phase or form known generally as faith cure. The consideration of the phenomena arising from the application and manifestation of this phase or form of faith power is well worthwhile, not alone because of their importance on their own account, but also because of the fact that in such consideration there is brought to light the operation of the potent force inherent in such general principle itself. By faith cure is meant the cure of disease by the exercise of faith in some external force or power, or in the force or power inherent in the mental or spiritual nature of the mind or soul of the individual. The following definitions, given by authoritative reference works, will perhaps bring out still more clearly the essential elements and meaning of this concept and term. Faith cure, or faith healing, is a form of mind cure characterized by the idea that while pain and disease really exist, they may be neutralized and dispelled by faith in divine power. The doctrine of Christian Science holds, however, that pain is only an illusion and seeks to cure the patient by instilling into him this belief. Faith cure is a term applied to the practice of curing disease by an appeal to the hope, belief, or expectation of the patient, and without the use of drugs or other material means. Formerly, faith cure was confined to methods requiring the exercise of religious faith, such as the prayer cure and divine healing, but has now come to be used in the broader sense, and includes the cures of mental science, also a large part of the cures effected by patent medicines and nostrums, as well as many folk practices and home remedies. By some, it is held to include also Christian Science, but the believers in the latter regard it as entirely distinct. Careful investigators and researchers along these lines are now generally agreed that the cures undoubtedly made by the various practitioners of the numerous schools and forms of faith cure, under their different names and theories of cure, have as their underlying effective principle the mental condition or state of faith, this principle operating so as to call forth the innate power of the mental physical organism to resist and to overcome the abnormal conditions which manifest as disease. Thus, all cures wrought by the mental forces of the individual, under whatever name or method, are, at the last, faith cures. That this innate power to resist and overcome disease actually exists in the human organism is now admitted by the best authorities. It is known as the protective and recuperative power of the organism, or else as the vis medicatrix naturae, or the healing power of nature. The power is known to dwell in that part of the mental equipment of man known as the subconscious mentality, which has direct control and supervision of many of the physical processes, and which is absolutely in charge of the involuntary processes, by means of which the most important functions of the body are performed. This innate power of the organism, so lodged in the subconscious mentality, is found to respond readily to the ideas accepted as true by the individual, to his beliefs, in short. These beliefs are forms of faith, at the last. The belief and faith of the individual in the effect and influence of any energy, force or power is capable not only of effecting cures of diseased conditions, but also of inducing and bringing about such conditions in the first place. That belief, expectant attention, confident expectation, in short, faith, is capable of causing the manifestation of conditions of physical disease, is now too well established to admit of doubt. Advanced schools of therapeutics recognize this fact and impart instruction based upon it. That the same kind of mental conditions act in the direction of curing disease is now practically admitted by the same schools. Science, after extended investigations of the subject, now holds that the truth, or lack of it, involved in the respective particular religious, metaphysical or philosophical theories advanced by the different faith cure schools, really have nothing whatsoever to do with the curative principle really employed, except that the plausibility of such theories may tend to arouse and maintain the belief and faith, the expectant attention and confident expectation, of the patient, thereby setting into operation the innate healing powers of the organism through the activities of the subconscious mentality. The fact that the various opposing schools, with their widely differing and often absolutely opposing sets of theories, are found to make cures in about the same proportion to the cases treated, is held to point conclusively to the existence of this common and universal element of faith as the real factor of the cures. It is admitted by practical psychologists that the expectant attention, the confident expectation, the faith, of the average person is more keenly aroused and more firmly held by the attractive religious or metaphysical explanations offered by many of these schools of faith cure than by the coldly scientific explanation furnished by scientific observers. Such attractive explanations and theories appeal more strongly to the imagination, and thus more easily set in force the activities of the subconscious mentality. But when science administers its masked suggestion in sufficiently attractive guises, it produces results equally efficient. The glowing verbal pictures painted by the quacks, the charlatans, and the patent cure promoters among the material remedy practitioners, as well as by the exploiters of nostrums and patent medicines, however, are quite attractive to the average imagination, and, as a consequence, many cures are made in this way. In all of such cases, be it noted, the theory and the method are merely incidental, the principle of faith cure is the active factor in the cure. It is not a matter so much of just what is believed in and is the object of faith, as it is of just how much it is believed in and becomes an object of faith. The theory and method, the instrument and vehicle, of the treatment is merely the capsule in which the active and potent force of faith is hidden. Faith cure, in its many forms, is as old as the race, it has been practiced from time immemorial. Formerly practiced by the medicine men of the tribes, through incantations, magic ceremonies, charms, etc., it gradually was taken over by the priesthood of the various early religions, and its instruments were prayers, sacred rites, sacred objects, etc. The history of mental medicine is filled with innumerable forms of the application of this potent force of faith and confident expectation, of expectant attention, as the scientific writers call it. The same principle operated through the instrumentality of various strange drugs and medicines in the history of material medicine, as reference to the medical textbooks show beyond a doubt. The Encyclopaedia Britannica, in its article on faith healing, says, in the Christian Church the tradition of faith healing dates from the earliest days of Christianity. Upon the miracles of the New Testament follow cases of healing, first by the apostles, then by their successors, but faith healing proper is gradually, from the 3rd century onwards, transformed into trust and relics, though faith cures occur sporadically at times. Catherine of Siena is said to have saved Father Matthew from dying of the plague, but in this case it is rather the healer who was strong in faith. With the Reformation, faith healing proper reappears among the Monrovians and Waldenses, who, like the peculiar people of our own day, put their trust in prayer and anointing with oil. In the 16th century we find faith cures recorded of Luther and other reformers, in the next century of the Baptists, Quakers, and other Puritan sects, and in the 18th century the faith healing of the Methodists in this country was paralleled by Pietism in Germany. In the 19th century Prince Hohenlohe, Canon of Grosswardein, was a famous healer on the continent. The Mormons and Irvingites were prominent among English-speaking peoples. In the last quarter of the 19th century faith healing became popular in London, and Beth Shan homes were opened in 1881, and since then it has found many adherents in England. Under faith healing in a wider sense may be included, 1. The cures in the temples of Aesculapius and other deities in the ancient world, 2. The practice of touching for the king's evil, in vogue from the 11th to the 18th century, 3. The cures of Valentine Greatrakes, the Stroker, 16281683, and 4. The miracles of Lourdes, and other resorts of pilgrims, among which may be mentioned St. Winfrid's Well in Flintshire, Treves with its holy coat, the grave of the Jansenist F. de Paris in the 18th century, the little town of Kevelaer from 1641 onwards, the tombs of St. Louis, Francis of Assisi, Catherine of Siena, and others. From the psychological point of view, all these different kinds of faith healing, as indeed all kinds of faith healing, as indeed all kinds of mind cure, including those of Christian Science and hypnotism, depend upon suggestion. In faith healing proper not only are powerful direct suggestions used, but the religious atmosphere and the autosuggestions of the patient cooperate, especially when the cures take place during a period of religious revival or at other times when large assemblies and strong emotions are found. The suggestibility of large crowds is markedly greater than that of individuals, and to this greater faith must be attributed the greater success of the fashionable places of pilgrimage. In general accounts of the phenomena of faith healing, such as the one above quoted, you will generally find 2 points needing more detailed comment, namely, 1. The point that cures are made even when the patients do not believe in the healing power invoked, and 2. The easy reference of the basic cause to suggestion, the statement often being made that it is merely suggestion. Let us consider these 2 points in a little further detail. In the first place, the person subjecting himself to these healing agencies always has some degree of belief and faith in the possible efficacy of the agency employed, else he would not take the trouble and spend the time and money necessary to take the treatment. This faith may be merely a sneaking belief, but it is always there. Particularly where money is involved, this element must be present, for one does not part with money for treatments which he feels certain will do no good. There is always some hope, belief and faith present. Even the man who sneers at the idea of his warts being cured by a powwow has at least a faint hope of some possible good accruing to him, else he would not bother with the matter at all. This faint hope, belief, or faith, is taken up by the subconscious mentality and is there intensified, magnified, and concentrated. It may be stated as a positive and invariable principle that, without some degree of faith and hope, some degree of expectant attention, there can be no faith cure. This belief, hope, and faith may be hidden, and apparently rejected by the conscious mentality, but its seeds and roots are present in the subconscious mentality, and begin to grow and send forth shoots and sprouts under the power of the expectant attention. In the second place, to explain the phenomena of faith cure by the statement, it is merely suggestion, is but to give the phenomena a new name. Affixing a new term is not a true explanation. Of course, faith cure is suggestion, but what is suggestion? Analyzing the phenomena attributed to suggestion, and reducing the idea of suggestion to its essential elements, we find that suggestion consists of 1. Placing a strong idea in the mind, grafting it on the mind, as it were, 2. Arousing the expectant attention of the results implied or indicated in the suggested idea, and 3. Setting into operation the activities of the subconscious mentality in the direction of bringing about the result pictured by the expectant attention, which in turn has been aroused by the suggested idea. There you have the whole idea of suggestion in a nutshell. The suggested idea may be one of disease, as well as of healing. It may be deliberately or otherwise grafted on the mind by another person, or it may arise through the autosuggestion of the person himself, made up of the material of ideas or suggestions that he has picked up in his experience with the world. In each case, and in all cases, the suggested idea is an idea which strikes the mind with force, and which seems quite reasonable, i.e., worthy of some belief. The expectant attention may be that of either fear or of hope. As we have explained to you before, its characteristic element is holding in mind with the idea that it will come to pass, happen, or occur, in some way. The action of the subconscious mentality we have previously described to you. Its action is that of accepting the suggested idea, manifesting the expectant attention even more powerfully and more consistently than does the conscious mentality, and setting about to make the idea come true, to realize the expectation, to come about that which is ideated and expected. You will find these elements in all cases of suggestion, just as you will find it in all cases of faith cure. Suggestion is the underlying element in faith cure, to be sure, but suggestion itself is merely a name employed to describe the mental activities to which we have referred. To say that faith healing is merely suggestion does not explain the matter, unless it is stated or admitted that suggestion is a means of arousing certain mental activities. Suggestion is an excellent term, when rightly understood, but it must not be employed as a fetish, or as an easy manner of dismissing certain important phenomena. Suggestion is made up of 1. Strong ideas or mental pictures, and 2. Expectant attention arising from confident expectation, and the latter is faith. When this combined idea faith is planted in the subconscious mentality of the person, it begins to grow, sprout, and to bring forth leaves, blossoms, and fruit in action and physical form. Now then, all phenomena of faith cure, and of suggestion as well, are seen to depend upon the presence and action of the element or principle of faith power in the mentality of the individual. This faith power, however, is a much greater thing than mere healing power, great as is the importance of this particular and special phase of its manifestation. Healing power is merely one of many phases of the force and power of faith power, merely one of its many forms of manifestation. The study of this phase of the whole subject, and the application of the valuable principles involved in it is well worthwhile, but at the same time you should not allow yourself to rest content with this one phase or form of its manifestation. The whole is always greater than any one of its component parts. What is the great lesson to be learned from the consideration of the wonderful phenomena of faith power in its phase of faith cure, or of healing power? The answer is that there are two elements involved in that lesson, viz. 1. That there exists and is active a great natural principle, inherent in your natural mental physical organism, which tends to produce decided and marked effect upon your physical body, either in the direction of disease or that of health and the cure of disease, and that this power is at your disposal and command, and to a great extent under your own control. 2. That this great principle is but a phase or form of a still greater universal principle of your being, which greater principle operates in the direction of setting to work forces which tend to materialize in objective form that which exists in your mind in subjective form, i.e. as idea and faith combined, correlated, and coordinated. This greater power, like its lesser and specialized form, is available for your use. It responds to your demands when properly made, and submits itself to your general direction of idea and faith. By an application of the first of the above stated elements of this greater principle of your being, and of nature as a whole, you may keep yourself in health, strength, and general desirable physical well-being, or you may bring about by it a gradual return to health and physical well-being. If you have lost these, again, if you allow this principle to be directed wrongly and abnormally, you may lose your physical well-being and health, and may start on the downward path of disease, the end of which is an untimely death. Your physical condition is very largely dependent upon the character and kind of the ideas and ideals which you permit to be planted in your mind, and by the degree of expectant attention, or faith, which you permit to vitalize these ideas and ideals. Briefly stated, the course to be followed by you in this matter is as follows. 1. Encourage ideas and ideals of health, strength, and vitality, the ideas of physical well-being, to take lodgment in your mind, there to send forth their roots, sprouts, blossoms, and fruit. Cultivate these ideas and ideals, and vitalize them with a goodly amount of expectant attention, confident expectation and faith along the lines of these conditions which you desire to be present in yourself. See yourself in your mind's eye as you wish to be, and confidently expect to have these conditions manifested in you by your subconscious mentality. 2. Never allow yourself to hold the ideas of diseased abnormal conditions, and, above all, never allow yourself to cultivate the mental habit of expecting such conditions to manifest in your body. Cultivate the attitude of faith and hope, and discard that of fear. 3. If your mind has been filled with these negative, harmful and destructive mental elements of idea and expectancy, and if your body has manifested disease in response to them, you should proceed to kill out these noxious mental weeds by a deliberate, determined and confident cultivation of the right kind of ideas and ideals, and states of expectancy. It is an axiom of advanced psychology that the positives tend to inhibit and to destroy the negatives. The weeds in the mental garden may be killed out by the careful and determined cultivation of the positive plants of hope, faith, and confident expectation of the good and desirable. As to the application of that greater principle of faith power, of which faith cure and healing power is but one phase of manifestation, we say to you that we are now leading you, step by step, in the direction of a full understanding of the nature and power of that greater principle, and of its practical and efficient application. The consideration of its power in the phase of faith cure or healing power is important for you, because it causes your mind, conscious and subconscious, to awaken to a realization of the presence and power of this principle of faith power as a whole, and furnishes you with concrete examples of that presence power, and of its manifestation in the everyday, practical life of the individual. Faith power is present and active, it is potent and powerful, and it is friendly to you if you recognize and realize its existence. It is ready to serve you, and to serve you well, provided that you call upon it properly and furnish it with the proper channels through which to flow in its efforts to manifest itself. This is the great truth back of the special lesson of faith cure. Faith and the subconscious. In the preceding section of this book we indicated to you the influence of faith or confident expectation upon those faculties of the mind, or those great fields or planes of mental activity, which are generally grouped under the classification of the subconscious. In that presentation, however, we considered only those subconscious mental activities which are concerned with the preservation or the restoration of physical well-being. Faith, however, influences and directs the subconscious mentality in many other ways than in that of faith cure or faith healing along the lines of mental therapeutics, as you will see as we proceed with this instruction. The subconscious, that great field or plane of mental activity, is the seat of far greater power, and the source of far deeper and broader streams of mental force, than the average person even begins to realize. In that field, or on that plane, are performed over 75% of man's mental activities. Our subconscious mentality has well been compared to the great mountain-like elevations of land under the surface of the ocean, abiding there in substantial form and serving as a support and base for that which appears above the surface, though invisible to the ordinary observer, the islands which appear above the surface representing the important, though comparatively limited area and extent of the conscious mentality. Others, with equal force, have compared the conscious mentality to the comparatively small area of a mighty iceberg floating through the seas of the Arctic region, the subconscious mentality being represented by the far greater substance and body of the iceberg which is submerged beneath the waters, and which is invisible. Again, the conscious mentality has been compared to the comparatively small section of the light spectrum which is visible to the human eye, which section includes the various light waves ranging from red to violet, the subconscious mentality being represented by that enormous field of the infrared rays on the one side, and the ultraviolet rays on the other. Our mental world is far more extensive than we usually conceive it to be, it has great comparatively unsound depths, and equally grand comparatively unsealed heights, the explored and charted areas of our conscious mentality are incidental and subordinate to those broad areas of which even the brightest minds of our race have merely explored the borderland, the expanded uncharted interior of the strange country still awaiting the exploring expeditions of the future. Our position in relation to this great terra incognita of the mind is similar to that of the ancient civilized world toward the earth as a whole. We are as yet awaiting the Columbus who will explore the western continent of the mind, and the Livingstones and Stanleys who will furnish us with maps of the mental darkest Africa. Yet, even the comparatively small explored areas of the subconscious have revealed to us a wonderful land, a land filled with the richest raw materials, precious metals, wonderful species of animal and plant life. And our daring investigators have discovered means of applying and using some of the faith and the subconscious wonderful things which have been discovered in even that borderland of the new mental world. The past 50 years have been very fruitful for the race in this direction. We have learned not only of the existence of this new land filled with wondrous things, but we have also learned much concerning the nature of those things, and, what is still better, we have learned much concerning the best methods of converting those things to our own uses. We have as yet much more to learn along these lines, but what has been already learned has revolutionized our conceptions of the mind, and has opened up to our conscious use great mental powers, the very existence of which were formerly unsuspected. We shall not enter here into a detailed consideration of the fields and plains of the subconscious realm of the mind, nor into a full description of what has been found to abide in those regions. We have considered these matters and subjects fully in that volume of this series which is entitled Subconscious Power, to which book we refer you if you are desirous of studying in further detail these subconscious faculties of the mind and the most efficient methods of applying and using them. In the present volume we are concerned almost entirely with the consideration of faith power and its effect upon the mind as a whole, the conscious planes as well as the subconscious, but inasmuch as faith power performs such a large part of its activities on the planes or in the fields of the subconscious, we find it necessary to make constant reference to the latter in our consideration of faith power. While it is true that desire is the motive power of all human action, conscious and subconscious, and that without desire, conscious or subconscious, there could and would be no such action, and while it is true that desire will go out toward idea, and that without idea, conscious or subconscious, there would be no moving of the mind to action, still it is equally true that the measure of the degree and the direction of such activity is dependent very largely upon the degree of faith, confident expectation or expectant attention manifesting in the individual. This is true concerning the activities of the conscious mentality, it is doubly or trebly true of the activities of the subconscious mentality. In fact, the subconscious mentality has been discovered to be very set in its beliefs, and to hold steadfastly to them when once they have taken lodgment within it, so much so, in truth, that it will often balk and rebel when the conscious mentality strives to set it to work in opposition to its fixed beliefs and habits of action. It is often found to be necessary to re-educate the subconscious, when it has been filled with erroneous beliefs and ideas, before it can be set to work in a new direction, a direction opposed to its old beliefs and ideas. Certain fields, at least, of the subconscious mental activity, certain of the subconscious mental faculties, at least, remind the scientific observer very much of the mind of the child. That is to say, like the mind of the child it is quite open to original impressions, and quite disposed to exercise faith and belief concerning ideas presented to it, provided that these ideas do not conflict with those already accepted by it, but, also, like the mind of the child, it will hold fast to these ideas when they have been accepted as truth and forcibly impressed upon it, and will find it difficult to accept or act upon ideas opposed to them. Like the child mind, also, it readily forms habits of belief, thought, and action, and when these are once set, it requires much work to change them or to reverse their action. We have evidences of this fact in our everyday lives. You, yourself, can testify to its truth. Like nearly every other person, you have found yourself strongly influenced by silly, irrational, superstitious ideas, notions and habits of thought and action, long after you have thoroughly convinced yourself that such superstitions have no basis in fact or in truth. Your conscious mentality frees itself from the bonds of the superstition, but when you come to the test you find within yourself, deep down in your mental and emotional being, a distinct, definite and positive tendency to act according to the old belief or notion. You feel the pull of the subconscious upon your will, and it often requires the greatest exercise of willpower to overcome that subconscious influence. The subconscious mentality must be re-educated before it will cease to protest and pull against your conscious reasoning mind. You, in all probability, have still some pet superstitions, notions which your reason pronounces to be absolutely ridiculous in their untruth and lack of reality, which, when it comes to the pinch, cause you to feel quite uncomfortable if you attempt to act contrary to them. It has well been said that while we laugh at the pet superstitions of others, we hug close to those of our own which are equally ridiculous. We pride ourselves on our rational actions, and our intellectual habits of thought and belief, but when it comes to walking under a ladder, sitting at a table with 13 persons present, doing things on Friday, breaking a mirror, etc., etc., we show plainly the force of this old pull and influence of subconscious belief and faith. And, if we act contrary to these, in spite of ourselves we find expectant attention being directed toward the result feared by the subconscious elements of our mental being. It is amusing to those who are free from those particular superstitions, and quite interesting to the scientific observer, to note that so many intelligent, well-informed, rational persons will hesitate to return for some forgotten thing after they once have left the house, or that they will knock wood after having made some statement expressing success, freedom from trouble, etc., or that they will show visible concern and distress when they spill salt at the table, or break a mirror, or do something else which their subconscious mentality believes to be a hoodoo. As for sitting at a table of 13 guests, some of the very bravest and most intelligent will feel that it is all wrong, and will sigh with relief when an extra guest is pressed into service to break the evil spell. Yet, in each of these cases, the person will frankly acknowledge that he has no rational or intellectual belief in the evil omen. He knows that there is absolutely nothing to it, but he feels queer about it, nevertheless, when he comes to the point of flying in the face of it. These persons are like the man who said that in the daytime he absolutely scorned the idea of ghosts, but that in the middle of the night he believed implicitly in them. These queer contradictions of human nature are accepted as matters of fact by most of us, though they are usually regarded as beyond rational explanation. However, when the action of the subconscious mentality is recognized, a new light is thrown upon the subject, and the perplexing mental duality is explained. The two sides of the mental shield are perceived and known to be just what they are. But these hidden beliefs of the subconscious, and its direction of action in accordance with them, are not confined to those superstitions concerning unlucky things and evil omens. Quite as strong and quite as active are the subconscious beliefs and notions about lucky things and good omens. The principle is the same in each case, though the direction is opposite. Many very intelligent men secretly feel that certain things are lucky for them, or that certain things act as charms bringing them success and good luck in their undertakings. Many a man has a sneaking belief in the efficacy of a horseshoe over the door, though he may pretend that it has been placed there just for fun. You will discover the strength of the subconscious belief if you attempt to remove the symbol. You would be surprised to learn how many otherwise intelligent persons carry lucky stones, lucky coins, or other charms held to bring success or to avoid the opposite. Not only this, but the subconscious entertains deep-rooted convictions and beliefs concerning the general success or non-success of the individual. The person who has constantly impressed upon his subconscious mentality that he is unlucky, and that fate is against me, has created a tremendous power within himself which acts as a brake or obstacle to his successful achievement. He has created an enemy within himself which serves to hold him back, and which fights against every inner effort in the direction of success. This hidden enemy hampers his full efforts and cripples his activities. On the contrary, the person who believes that luck is running my way, and that things are working in my favor, not only releases all of his latent energies but also actually stimulates his full powers, along subconscious lines as well as conscious. You have probably had the experience of feeling that things were going against you, and as a result your enthusiasm and interest then burned very low. Later you became convinced by some little circumstances that my luck has turned, and as a result your spirit manifested itself in keener desire and determined will. If you have not had this experience yourself, you have doubtless perceived it manifesting in other persons under your observation. Many men have become so convinced of their propitious destiny that they have overcome obstacles which would have blocked the progress of one holding the opposite conviction. In fact, most of the men who have used their failures as stepping stones to subsequent success have felt within themselves the conviction that they would triumph in the end, and that the disappointments and temporary failures were but incidents of the game. Men have believed in their stars, or in the presence and power of something outside of themselves which was operating in the direction of their ultimate triumph. This has given to them an indomitable will and an unconquerable spirit. Had these same men allowed the conviction of the operation of adverse and antagonistic influences to take possession of their souls, they would have gone down in the struggle, and would have stayed down. In either case, however, the real something, which they have believed to be an outside thing or entity, has been nothing more nor less than the influence and power of their own subconscious, in one case pulling with them, and in the other pulling against them. The man with his subconscious filled with belief and faith in his non-success, and in the inevitable failure of his efforts, the man whose confident expectation is that of non-success, failure and inability, and whose expectant attention is directed toward such an outcome and the incidents and circumstances leading up to it, is like a man in the water who is swimming against the stream. He is opposing the strong current, and his every effort is counteracted and overcome by the adverse forces of the stream. Likewise, the man whose subconscious is saturated with the conviction of ultimate victory and final success, whose confident expectation is directed toward that end, and whose expectant attention is ever on the lookout for things tending to realize his inner beliefs, is like the swimmer who is moving in the direction of the current. Such a man not only is not really opposed by the forces of the stream, but, instead, has these forces at work aiding him. The importance of having the faith, confident expectation and expectant attention of the subconscious directed toward your success, achievement and successful ultimate accomplishment, and the importance of not having these mighty forces operative against yourself, may be realized when you stop to consider that in the one case you have 3/4 of your mental equipment and power operating in your favor, and in the other case you have that 3/4 operating against you. And that 3/4, in either case, not only is working actively during your waking hours, but also works while you sleep. To lose the assistance of that 3/4 would be a serious matter, would it not? But far more serious is it to have that 3/4 actually working against you, having it on the side of the enemy. This is just what happens when the subconscious gets into action under the influence of wrongly directed faith, expectant attention, and confident expectation. The ideas, plans, inner suggestions, hints, hunches, and other strange mental states which are constantly rising from the depths of the subconscious to the surface of conscious thought are potent factors in the mental work, achievements and accomplishments of the individual. To the man of hopeful confident expectation these point out the road to increased efficiency and progress. To the man of fearful confident expectation they point out the dangers, obstacles, hindrances, defeating influences and the other things which paralyze man's will and cause his spirit to sink and his heart grow heavy with discouragement. The spirit, the soul, the heart of the man are colored by these subconscious influences, and, in turn, they tend to provoke action and movement in the direction corresponding to the state of belief indicated by that color. The inner state manifests in the outer action, the ideal tends to become real, the materialization proceeds in the shape and form of the visualization. Expectant attention plays an important part in this manifestation of the faith and confident expectation of the subconscious. We have pointed out to you that attention is attracted to, and drawn out by those objects and subjects which are the subject of its interest and belief, and that it ignores objects and subjects contrary to these. So true is this that if two men of equal mental powers and intellectual efficiency were subjected to precisely the same conditions and set of circumstances, were caused to undergo the same general experiences, in fact, each might obtain entirely opposite results were their respective subconscious mentalities filled with opposite conditions of faith and confident expectation. The expectant attention of each man would cause him to perceive things which were imperceptible to the other man of equal mental power and intelligence. One would see the thorns, the other the roses; one would see the whole, the other the body of the donut; one would see only the things making for failure, the other the things conducive to his success. Each would see that for which he was looking, and would be looking for that which his confident expectation believed would be found, and to which accordingly his expectant attention would be directed. This is why one man would be able to say, in the end, and lo, mine own hath come to me, and the other, that which I feared hath verily now come upon me. But this is not all. In other books of this series we have called your attention to the power of the mind to attract to itself the things of the outside world which are correlated to its thoughts. In the books, Personal Power, and Thought Power, respectively, we have gone into details concerning this subject which is merely referred to at this place. That such law of mental attraction exists is now admitted by many of the world's most careful thinkers. It is no longer held to be a vague and fanciful notion held by a few visionaries. Whatever may be the theory held to be underlying it, and there are many such, the presence and power of this law must be admitted by all unprejudiced persons. Its results and effects form evidence found at every turn, evidence which is valid and incontrovertible. This law of mental attraction, being mental in its essence and in its form of action, must operate on all planes of the mind, and, indeed, has been discovered so to act. The mind has many planes of activity, and as we have said, at least 3/4 of its operations are performed below or above the plane of ordinary consciousness. The subconscious plays a most important part in the operations of this mental law of attraction. The forces under this law are largely set in motion and activity by impulses coming from the region of the subconscious. This being the case, you may realize how important it is for you to so train, educate, re-educate and direct your subconscious mental faculties that they may be filled with the faith of hope, and not the faith of fear, that your confident expectation may be directed forward, and not backward, that your expectant attention may see the helpful things, and not those which hinder and pull back. Get busy with your subconscious. Train it, educate it, re-educate it, direct it, incline it, teach it, suggest to it, along the lines of the faith in success and power, and not those of the faith in failure and weakness. Set it to work swimming with that current. The subconscious is much given to faith, it lives on faith, it acts upon faith. Then see that you supply it with the right kind of faith, and avoid as a pestilence that faith which is based on fear and is grounded in failure and despair. Think carefully, and act. Faith and enthusiasm. Faith is the underlying principle of that remarkable quality of the human mind which is known as enthusiasm. It is its essence, it is its substance, it is its actuating principle. Without faith there can be no manifestation of enthusiasm. Without faith there can be no expression of the activities of enthusiasm. Without faith there can be no exhibition of the energies of enthusiasm. Without faith the quality of enthusiasm remains dormant, latent and static. Faith is needed to arouse it, to render it active, to cause it to become dynamic. Moreover, the faith required for the manifestation and expression of enthusiasm must be positive faith, faith in the successful outcome of the undertaking, faith exhibiting its positive phases, faith in the attainment of that which is desirable and which is regarded as good. You can never manifest enthusiasm toward that which you confidently expect to be a failure, nor toward that which you feel will bring undesirable results and effects. Negative faith has no power to arouse enthusiasm. The presence of positive faith is necessary to awaken this wonderful latent mental or spiritual force. Enthusiasm is a mental or spiritual force which has always been regarded by mankind with respect, often with a respect mingled with awe. To the ancients it seemed to be a special gift of the gods, and by them it was regarded as animating the individual with almost divine attributes of power, and as causing him to absorb a portion of the essence of the divine nature. Recognizing the fact that men under the influence of enthusiasm often accomplish almost superhuman tasks, the ancients came to believe that this added power and capacity arose from the superimposition of power from planes of being above that of humanity. Hence, they employed terms to define it which clearly indicated their belief in its transcendent nature. The term, enthusiasm, is directly derived from the ancient Greek term meaning, to be inspired by the gods. The two compositive elements of the original term are, respectively, a term denoting inspiration, and one denoting the gods, or divinity, the two terms in combination meaning literally, inspired by the gods. The present meaning of the term, in its English usage, is 1. Inspiration as if by a divine or superhuman power, or 2. Enkindled and kindling fervor of soul, or 3. Ardent and lively zeal or interest. The term, enthusiast, formerly was employed in the strict sense of one moved or actuated by enthusiasm, but it has gradually acquired the corrupted meaning of visionary, fanatic, zealot, or one carried away by zeal or fanaticism, this latter meaning having arisen by reason of the intemperate actions and expressions of persons carried away by zeal or fanaticism, lacking the balance of reason and logic. The implied discredit arising in this way has in some degree extended to the term, enthusiasm, itself. This is much to be regretted, for the term has an honorable history and in its true meaning indicates a most important and valuable quality of the human mentality. It should be needless for us to add here that in the present consideration of the subject we are employing the term enthusiasm only in its true sense and with its most approved meaning and implication. It is interesting to note that in the history of the term, enthusiasm, the word has been almost invariably associated with the idea of inspiration. The latter term originally meant breathing in, and in its figurative sense it indicated a breathing in of divine or superhuman power. As we have pointed out to you, enthusiasm originally meant to be inspired by the gods. Later, the definition was extended to include the inspiration of great writers, poets, artists, and orators. Thus, Socrates speaks of the inspiration of the poets as a form of enthusiasm. In its present usage the term, enthusiasm, has come to mean a lively, ardent, wholehearted interest in or devotion to a cause, subject, or object, and the word, inspiration, is employed to indicate an elevating, quickening, enthusiastic interest, which stimulates and animates the intellect and the emotions of the individual. The two expressions, enthusiasm and inspiration, respectively, have traveled hand in hand through the centuries. Even today, in the more or less figurative and metaphorical employment of these words, we find that the quality of enthusiasm is held to manifest and express itself in that quickening stimulation of intellect and emotions, which denotes inspiration in such modern usage. Here the student of psychology finds another instance and illustration of the general rule according to which modern psychology employs the present knowledge of the subconscious to account for much that was formerly attributed to supernatural, or at least superhuman influences and power. Enthusiasm and inspiration, which the ancients believed to be the result of the breathing in of divine or supernatural essence, or the superimposition of supernatural or superhuman power, are now held to be the result of the aroused and quickened activities of the subconscious, of that wonderful region of the mentality of man from which emerges so much of the greatest importance to him. In the subconscious of man there abide many wonderful powers of mind and will. It would seem that man has merely scratched the surface of his mental capacity and power, and that great stores of power remain beneath that surface, as yet untouched, awaiting the tapping of the mental tools of the individual. At times, under great stress and under great necessity, the individual seems to contact these hidden storehouses of power, and, accordingly, he is able to perform work which ordinarily is far beyond his power of accomplishment. At such times we say of him that he is veritably inspired, and he seems, indeed, to have breathed in some strange potent influence which magnifies his powers and efficiency. But, the necessity over, the individual usually loses his new power, and sinks back to his ordinary condition, he has not as yet learned how to maintain or retain the contact once accomplished. William James, in his celebrated essay, The Powers of Man, called attention to this comparatively common occurrence, i.e., that of the sudden inrush of increased power in times of necessity. He compared it to the second wind, which comes to the person who has overexerted his ordinary physical powers. Such person, after feeling exhausted and fatigued to such an extent as almost to be compelled to cease his efforts, when he is all out of breath, suddenly experiences a feeling of relief, and finds that his second wind has come to him, and that he is thereby enabled to make a fresh start. Professor James held that man not only possesses the power of developing a second wind in physical exertion, but that also he has the power of developing a mental second wind in much the same manner. He points out to his readers that often when a man is compelled to perform mental work under an increased strain by reason of unusual necessity, and when as the result of such effort, he finds himself on the verge of complete exhaustion, then, in many instances, he seems to tap a deeper stratum of mental energy, and lo! His mind takes on a new freshness and manifests renewed power. The mental second wind thus attained, he is able to make a fresh start. James held that not only is the mental second wind capable of development, but also that there is the possibility of the development of a third wind, a fourth wind, and so on, the limit not being as yet known. Others who have used the James theory of the mental second wind as a foundation for further speculation and experiment, have sought to locate the storehouse of this latent second wind of the mind. They have pointed out that it must be stored away somewhere, for it could not have proceeded from nothingness. These psychologists, and others, are practically in general agreement in the belief that this hidden storehouse is located in the great regions of the subconscious, and that its stores are possible of being drawn upon only when the subconscious is aroused, stimulated or quickened by great interest, when it is inspired by great feeling, in short, when it is filled with enthusiasm. The above stated conclusion agrees with our own general experience, with your own personal experience, in fact. You have found that when you become quite intensely interested in a subject, object, study, pursuit, or cause, so that your enthusiasm is thoroughly aroused, then there comes to you a highly increased and greatly intensified degree in amount of mental energy and power. At such times your mind seems to work with lightning-like rapidity, and with a wonderful sense of ease and efficiency. Your mental powers seem to be quadrupled, your mental machinery seems to have some miraculous oil poured into the proper place, thus removing all friction and allowing every part of the mechanism to move smoothly and easily and with wonderful speed. At such times you feel, indeed, actually, inspired. You feel that a new world of attainment would be open to you if you could but make this mental condition a permanent one. This increased sense of mental power, this increased ease of mental work, this increased capacity for accomplishment, all these are manifestations and expressions of that second wind, which is one of the qualities of the subconscious, and which is called forth whenever and wherever you can manage to arouse your subconscious faculties to a sufficient extent. You will find by exercising your powers of remembrance that in the cases mentioned you have been conscious of a greater or less amount of enthusiasm, i.e., of a lively quickening of interest in the matter before you and toward which you have directed your concentrated attention. This enthusiasm has so stimulated and vitalized your intellectual and emotional powers that your reserve force of mental energy has been drawn upon and you have become conscious of an inflow of efficiency and capacity in the performance of the task, duty, or work before you. You may readily see how and why the ancients believed this to be the action of a supernatural or superhuman power which was breathed in by them and which was in effect inspiration. Looking around you in your world of practical everyday work and effort, you will see why businessmen and other men of affairs regard as an important factor of successful work that mental quality known as enthusiastic interest on the part of the persons performing that work. This enthusiastic interest in the work or task is found to call forth all the mental and physical powers of the worker. He not only puts into his task every ounce of his ordinary capacity, but he also draws upon that hidden reserve force of his subconscious mentality and adds that to his ordinary full energy. When he approaches the fatigue limit, his enthusiastic interest carries him on, and before long he has caught his second wind and obtained his fresh start. Ask any successful sales manager for a list of the essential characteristics of the successful salesman, and on that list you will find this capacity for or habit of enthusiastic interest occupying a prominent place. This, not only because of its highly important effect upon the work of the salesman himself, but also because enthusiasm is contagious, and the lively, quickened interest of the salesman tends to communicate itself to the subconscious mentality of his customer. In the same way, the enthusiasm of the public speaker, orator, advocate, or statesman energizes and quickens his entire intellectual and emotional nature, thus causing him to do his best, likewise communicating itself to his audience by means of mental contagion. The man with his soul afire tends to fire the souls and hearts of those around him. The spirit of the enthusiastic leader, foreman, or boss, is caught by those under him. Enthusiasm is clearly a manifestation of the emotional phase of man's mentality, and it appeals directly and immediately to the emotional nature of others. Likewise, it is clearly a product of the subconscious mentality, and accordingly it appeals directly and immediately to the subconscious mentality of others. Its effect is characteristically animating, energizing, inspiring, quickening. It not only stirs the feelings and sets fire to the spiritual nature, but it also stimulates and vivifies the intellectual faculties. The live wires in the world of men are those individuals who possess the quality of enthusiastic interest, highly developed, and habitually manifested when the occasion calls for it. Overdone, it defeats its object. The golden mean must be observed, but lacking it the man is what is known in the idiom of practical men as a dead one. As we have previously pointed out to you, enthusiasm without faith is a mere term having no real substance or meaning. Or else it is a sham, a counterfeit, a bluff, or perhaps a hysterical imitation of the real mental quality. The man of true enthusiasm does not gush, nor is he a visionary or a fanatic. These are the signs of the abnormal development or manifestation of this valuable quality. The man of true enthusiasm is characterized by his abiding faith in his proposition or subject, by his lively interest in it, by his earnestness in presenting it and working toward its accomplishment, by his untiring, indefatigable efforts on its behalf. Faith, however, is the foundation upon which all the rest is built. Lacking faith, the structure of enthusiasm falls like a house of cards. The more faith a man has in that which he is doing, toward which he is working, or that which he is presenting to others, the greater will be the manifestation of his own powers and capacity, the more efficient will be his performance of the work, and the greater will be his ability to influence others and to cause them to see things in the light of his own earnest belief and interest. Faith arouses and sustains enthusiasm, lack of faith deadens and inhibits it, unfaith and positive disbelief kill it. It is clear that the first step toward the cultivation and development of enthusiasm is that of the creation of faith in the subject or object toward which you wish to manifest and express enthusiasm. If you have no faith in the subject or object of your activities, then you will never be able to manifest enthusiasm concerning that subject or object, and if you are unable to manifest at least a fair degree of such enthusiasm, then you will never be able to express your full energies or to manifest your full powers in those activities. Finally, if you are unable to express your energies to the full and to manifest your powers adequately in those activities, then you will never be able to attain the full measure of success in your work connected with that particular subject or object. If you cannot arouse faith and enthusiasm in your work, you would do well to change your work so as to have it cover that in which you can arouse faith and manifest enthusiasm. Faith, however, is not all that is involved in enthusiasm. Added to faith there must be a keen interest in the subject or object toward which you have directed your expectant attention. Interest adds zest to your activities, and renders pleasant the tasks which without it would be monotonous drudgery and slavish toil. Interest transforms toil and work into a labor of love. When you are deeply interested in a task, you like to perform the work connected with it. Interest arouses the creative instinct in the heart and soul of the worker, and all true creative expression is pleasant, and is capable of affording satisfaction to the worker. The best work is not that work performed merely by the hands, nor even that in which the head adds its work to that of the hands. It is only when the heart takes its place in the working partnership, and adds its power to that of head and hands, that the really creditable and worthy work of the individual is performed. Interest may be aroused and maintained by an intelligent observation of the subject or object of the work. Everything is capable of arousing interest if you will look deep enough and long enough for its interesting qualities and properties. The discovery of interesting facts or qualities in anything creates new interest. This new interest attracts still newer interest, and this still further interest, until finally you find yourself quite deeply engrossed by the subject or object. There is an emotional satisfaction in the discovery of new facts and qualities in anything under your observation, and there is a similar pleasure in discovering improved ways of performing a task. Interest developed to a sufficient extent leads directly toward enthusiasm. Interest, however, is quite difficult to arouse concerning anything in which you have no faith. Lack of faith is a negative mental quality, and it serves to deaden all the mental powers which are involved in the consideration of and thought concerning a subject or object. Still more harmful is a positive unfaith in a subject or object, a positive belief that the thing is not worthy, not good, not worthwhile, not honest, not destined to succeed, or, rather, destined not to succeed. Disbelief, or belief directed toward the undesirable qualities or prospects of a thing, quickly deaden all interest in that thing, and, interest absent, the thing becomes hateful, and all work connected with it grows loathsome. Faith being absent, interest dies, and, interest dying or dead, there can be no enthusiasm felt, expressed or manifested. Lack of faith, however, or even positive unfaith, often may be overcome by a careful and extended examination and consideration of the subject or object in question. Your lack of faith, or even your positive unfaith concerning that subject or object may arise from an imperfect knowledge concerning it. Before discarding a thing as incapable of arousing and maintaining faith in your mind concerning it, you should examine it from every angle and from every point of view, so as to be sure that you really understand it down to the ground floor. Do not allow your prejudices to exert an undue influence upon you. This is a most common mistake and fault. Get your facts right before you act. You may discover new facts which will change your whole mental attitude toward the thing in question, and you may thus find a firm foundation for a new faith in it. But, having observed every precaution, and having tested the thing from every angle and viewpoint, and having finally come to the positive and certain conclusion that there is not and can never be any faith in you concerning that thing, then there is but one course for you to pursue, and that course is to get away from that thing as soon as you can do so with due regard for your duties toward yourself and to others who may be interested with you in the thing. Time and labor bestowed upon a thing in which you have no faith, and toward which you feel sure that you can never entertain faith, is time and labor wasted. Get out and take hold of something in which you have, or can have, faith, toward which and concerning which you feel that you can manifest and express enthusiasm. Life without faith and enthusiasm is a living death. Persons living that life are mere walking corpses. If you would be a live wire instead of a dead one, you must begin to arouse and develop enthusiasm in your heart and soul. You must cultivate that keen and quickened interest, and that lively and earnest faith in what you are doing, and in the things to which you are giving your time and work. You must mentally breathe in, and inspire, that spirit of life which men for many centuries have called enthusiasm, and which is the twin sister of inspiration. Then will you know the exhilaration of that enkindled and kindling fervor of soul, that ardent and lively zeal, the mark of true enthusiasm.